What the heck is going on, folks? Welcome to the show, Mixed Bag Panel number 6. Today, we're going to have a return guest, Mr. Chad O. Jackson. I'll bring him to the stage. He can introduce himself again.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can. Welcome.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no problem.
Glad I didn't disappoint you last time.
No way. It's awesome.
So yeah, I'm Chad O. Jackson. You can find me on YouTube at Chad O. Jackson. You can also find me on IG and X. I am an independent researcher and I guess, film producer of sorts. Mm-hmm. And I like to opine on how the civil rights movement was a lie, how feminism was a lie, how a lot of these social justice movements are just one big lie. So that's
awesome.
My whole thing. So yeah,
that's why we love you over here. I love the civil rights. I want to do more focus on that. That could come up tonight, by the way. AJ Hurley, welcome to the stage. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
What's going on, guys? My name is AJ Hurley. Thanks for having me on, Jim Bob. I am a neonatal respiratory therapist turned pro-life activist. Speaker. Love all things babies, all things the unborn, and I just feel like it's my job, duty, responsibility, calling to protect the unborn child. And so not a popular message these days. So that's kind of me. I work for the White Rose Resistance, which is a pro-life organization run by my friend, amazing speaker and pro-life advocate, Seth Gruber. And you can mainly find me on Instagram. However, I did just start a YouTube channel. So you can find me at AJ Hurley on YouTube. I'll be getting some content going soon and mixing things up. But I'm super stoked to be with you guys. So thanks.
Well, welcome. Mr. Hake, welcome to the show. Go ahead and introduce yourself for those of you who don't know.
Well, thanks for having me, Made by Jim Bob. Nice to see you and meet you, Chad Jackson and AJ Hurley. I'm James Hake, host of the Hake Report. I'm live weekdays from 9 to 11 Pacific time here in Los Angeles. You can catch me on Jesse Lee Peterson's radio show. I do Hake News, not fake news. And I help JLP with church at his nonprofit organization Bond. TheHakeReport.com, and it has all my links there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you all for coming here. Again, this is a pretty much open style panel. Previous panels could get very heated. I don't think this one will, but who knows? I can be wrong here. You never know. We can work. We can work towards something. I actually wanted to start
questions about Jesse Lee Peterson. However,
there we go. Put Hake in the defense seat. Yes, sure.
Yes.
I have someone who follows who does one of the best, Jesse Lee Peterson. I know there's a couple out there that really get it. He's one of them, but who knows if he's listening? He might call in and have some words with you, AJ. If you go at him, he'll call right in. I wanted to start. Amazing. I'm going to start with something very, pretty much superficial. I usually laugh at this stuff, but people make a lot of it, and so this is Elon Musk and his next venture, right?
Neuralink. Elon Musk has been wanting to get inside our heads.
We think probably in about 6 months we should be able to have our first Neuralink in a human.
Right. I mean, this is what we usually respond to this and we go, oh no, this is, obviously I have that side where I'm grossed out by transhumanism. I think transhumanism and the other Troons movement are kind of running parallel. But when I look at this, I kind of giggle because he's always selling something that really, when you look at it, is just a handicap. You know what I mean? It's like a person who can't use their hands, if they had the choice, they'd be like, if only I could use my hands to search on my phone. And Elon's like, hey, do you want to be handicapped? It's like, it's almost akin to someone selling me a wheelchair and be like, Jim Bob, don't you realize you don't have to use your legs anymore? And that, from that angle, I sort of giggle at this stuff, but obviously there's another perhaps nefarious angle. Instead of giggling it off, I just think giggling it off is helpful. What's your guys' take, not just on this tech, but Elon Musk's sort of archetypical role culturally, like the Iron Man role that he's always kind of drizzling these what will be very what are promised to be very debilitating in a sense, like upending society altogether with his technology. He never quite follows through anyway. What do you guys think about this?
I guess I could start. Everything, part of problem with society now is everything is a psyop. So when everything's a psyop, nothing's a psyop. But I kind of wonder, so Elon has to it's interesting that he's kind of more on the right wing, or at least known as being more right wing now, because that's probably his greatest opposition at this point, right? Would be people who believe in limited government, people who believe in a really against big tech censorship, big government in any regard. So it's kind of interesting how he's poised himself as this hero of free speech and all this stuff, because the obvious problems here is when I see something like this is I automatically think transhumanism. I always like all the flags go up. What is the implications for individual liberty, individual rights? I'm now giving the government free reign, basically, because of the fact that we know Edward Snowden, the whole thing. The government's looking at everything, right? They're in our computers. They see everything on our iPhones. Everything is all out and open to the public. So I'm just kind of wondering, where is the lines with something like this? And what are the implications? More of that slippery slope argument for me, more than, that old thing. It's like you asked, what's that, Jurassic Park? You figured out you could do it, but you never really asked, should you? And right. I don't know. I'm scared of the implications. Obviously, when you have people who have no use of their limbs, it would be amazing for them to have this type of technology to support their lives, giving back freedom and unbelievable technological advances in that regard. But my fear is that with liberty comes an erosion of rights, and it makes me very unnerved. To say
sure.
What's his purpose for this piece of technology? Did he say?
Well, it all comes down to, really, if you really push him, I think what I've seen and written is that it is what AJ said on the tail end there, is that it's primarily toward people who need it, right? So, but the question is, do they really need? I mean, it's like, now the chubby guy can be like, I want to look at porn, with my brain. It's like, it doesn't tell you how you should be using it if it enables such things. So it's like, it really just enables some activity, but it doesn't gear us toward anything better or necessarily worse. It just kind of is tech. And so that's why, from my view, like examining these things from a duties-based system where you're always comparing what's happening, like AJ said, to your ethical system. And a lot of this tech is never, Elon definitely talks about the scariness of like AI. So he has ethics on the brain, but I actually wonder what his intent is. And does he do that on purpose? Hake, what do you think? Have you ever engaged with him at all in your escapades?
I've reported on him for Hake News, of course, stuff that he's doing with X, Twitter, and minimally the Neuralink stuff. I don't really follow the transhumanism scare, and I'm not dismissing it entirely.
Sure.
Just because I just don't understand it. I do get the trans in general is a fantasy and twisted, but I do kind of, like AJ mentioned, see Elon as a well-meaning guy. Well-meaning guys get used for evil, of course. And beyond that, I don't really have an opinion on this Neuralink stuff. I think it's kind of cool, but it's also really best used by the people who can use it to do stuff that the rest of us more easily do, who are handicapped and stuff like that.
Right.
But
Maybe Stephen Hawking already had access to the Neuralink, and that's why he was such a degenerate. He was
Could
just
be.
looking at porn in his mind.
He was like, send me to Epstein Island.
Take me back. I'm already there.
Yeah. Chad, what do you think? I don't see you really focusing too much on tech, but I'm sure you have a take.
No, my take on Elon, and I don't really keep up with him a lot. I do know that people say that he is big into free speech. I hear a lot of people who are independent or conservatives making such claims. I don't know about his brand of conservatism. As far as this tech is concerned, I agree with you insofar that it seems to be one of those things that Elon has this kind of groundbreaking technology that he's introducing, only for it to later fall through.
Yeah.
But again, I think that Elon represents a brand of quote unquote conservatism that lacks principles. Because when you look at his take on anti-Semitism and such things as that, it's like, okay, again, there's a lot of conservatives who just don't know which way is up as far as their principles are concerned. And I don't really care for that brand of conservatism.
Does he consider himself a conservative?
I've never heard him count him.
No.
I've never heard him consider himself a conservative, but I have heard him talk pretty disparagingly about wokeism. So
what is a conservative?
He knows when to use the conservative bowling lane, depending on what day it is. To put it that way.
Right.
Yeah, I think
what is conservatism? Honestly, at these days, right? It's like conservatism is a meaningless term. What are we conserving? Is the fundamental question that nobody seems to be able to answer. It's like so the founding fathers all understood that virtue was the thing that must underline and underscore every single aspect of liberty, because you can't give liberty to a licentious group of people who are incapable of self-government. So that's why all the founders understood. I mean, that classical quote, was it? The Constitution was written for a moral and religious people. It's wholly incompetent for any other, because they understood that, if you don't have a basal understanding of virtue, then every single liberty will just erode and degrade the nation, and then you'll be left with nothing other than big government needing to come in and restrain the masses. So as far as I'm concerned, it's like Twitter, for instance. I mean, Twitter's now under Elon's control. What I would love to see is what the heck, like, you know how much porn is on Twitter? Like,
yeah, he just lets it go on. Right?
It's It's supposed to be censored,
completely
I heard.
uncensored.
Oh, it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's worse than Instagram. It's worse than, I mean, like hardcore pornography, totally uncensored. And in my opinion, that isn't free speech, you know,
Right.
and there has to be some type of morality that governs freedom or free. Like what is freedom? And we understand it's like, oh, like even this a whole idea of consent. Oh, it's okay just because I consented to it.
Mhm.
Well, so I should just be able to beat the shit out of my sexual partner. And just because we both consent to it, that somehow it's within the realm of moral acceptability. And this is the problem, I think, with classical liberalism, to be honest.
Sure.
And we can get into a whole, you know,
Yeah. Eventually, I mean, I would
later-
love
later
to.
regard,
The whole classical liberal project, which is now kind of branched into just like these sort of pure libertarian or anarchist pods. It's the same approach, AJ, is like if you just liberty itself couldn't be the virtue alone, because that just gives you a flat space to operate. It doesn't tell you how you ought to operate. And so what AJ just laid out is also my argument against that whole foundation, like that you can't just promise people liberty for liberty's sake, because if they take it and turn it every city into San Francisco or Burning Man, which the two are indistinguishable, Burning Man might be better than San Francisco at this point.
Right.
That's all downstream from this concept where me getting to do whatever I want so long as consent is there. You know, this is why they say they use the phrase "we-merica," like Weimer, like we don't learn too much about what was happening before in Germany, and we probably can't learn too much more on YouTube. But
Exactly.
there is something to say about the falling away from ethical norms, traditional norms, customs, decency laws, right? So when someone advocates for pure free speech, I always ask them, well, do you really mean that? Because the Twitter example is a great example. Like, or someone in public, just like some dude in a thong, right? New York City, he's walking his mate. He's walking his mate like a dog, right? Well, what's your problem? I have the right. I picked up the poop. What's your problem? It's like no. This should be basically shoveled off. The whole thing should be shoveled off the sidewalk, which makes people on the right, especially this modern conservative right, very hesitant, because they're like, wait a second, I thought liberty above all is what we're actually arguing. And then to AJ's point, conserving what? Just the liberty for people to dress up how they want in public, right in front of children? Like, can I make a dildo shape? Sorry, excuse my French, but a dildo shaped building? Why not? Why not?
And mentorship is a tool. It's a tool that's used for good or for evil. And same thing with freedom. It's used for good or evil, and it should be applied with some common sense.
Right.
Common sense, though the problem is common sense according to whose standard of common, right?
True.
And so,
True.
But the left, to be honest, understands this. They understand this because they don't believe in free speech either.
Right.
Which is why I mean, a perfect example is these conspiracy laws that are being used. You guys hear about the guy who he posted that meme about Hillary Clinton, vote for Hillary Clinton, text this number. He was jailed for 7 months for that, and charged with a conspiracy statute that was originally designed for the KKK, and which holds a maximum, I believe, of 10 years in prison. By the way, that all these pro-life people are being, same thing Trump was charged with also, and so the point is, the left understands hate speech. They understand blasphemy laws, right? They call them hate speech laws. And even the most leftist person who believes in anarchy, or whether it be some concept of free speech, but the basic point is that they believe in blasphemy laws. They have blasphemy laws. They're inevitable. and they are used according to their standards.
Right. And then we go, no, we're conservative.
Yeah.
We don't want to step in. And it's like, dude, you're literally opening a vacuum, right, to the government and to all the, the schools, the entertainment industry. You're opening it up as a vacuum, and you think that nobody's going to step in and instill their standards in public schools, their standards in government. They say, no, you got to keep government and in your theology separate. How? That's not even possible. Like, if I get elected, right, what am I supposed to? Let me put my hand on the Bible, by the way, to promise to remove everything in the Bible when I'm elected. This is nonsense. We've been tricked. People have been tricked into thinking this is even a practical possibility. It's logically impossible to remove yourself.
Everybody cites the First Amendment in this regard, but they don't realize that when the First Amendment was penned, 9 out of the 13 colonies that established the Constitution, that established the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. 9 of the 13 colonies had individual state enshrined, individual denominations enshrined into their state constitutions. 9 out of the 13 Christian denominations, right? So this whole idea of the First Amendment was that we don't want we want religious liberty, but that's defined as Christian religious liberty,
right?
According to denominational standards. So, if you lived in Rhode Island or Connecticut, you could be Congregationalist or Presbyterian, and you can enshrine that into your state constitution. But we don't want this federal government creating one federal constitution, particular Christian denomination, and pushing that from the top down on the states. So this whole, and now you're seeing the Church of Satan, who are erecting statues of Satan. And this is the ploy, right? If you have this pluralistic idea of we can determine this level of neutrality that we can institute in the public square. So now they're erecting statues of Satan.
Yeah, neutrality is a myth. Neutrality is an absolute myth. It's a complete myth.
And the guy, by the way, who ripped down the statue of Satan is now being charged with a hate crime, the left's blasphemy laws.
Nice.
And because this underscores the reality that the left believes in blasphemy laws. They believe in an erosion of freedom of speech. It's just on the standards that they deem the religion of the leftism, whichever particular flavor is ruling the day. This democracy, demos ruling the system, is their particular flavor of religion that they institute from the top down. This is why people realize that it's an inescapable. R.J. Rushton used to talk about inescapable concepts. It's an inescapable concept that religion will rule society.
Yeah, I mean, that's what culture means. Religion.
Right.
Cultus, right? It's taken from the Latin cultus, which means worship. And so some ideological principle will govern society. It just depends on whose.
Right.
This is the trick. This is the trick that, we all go through our phases, right? But, when I was getting off the default sinking ship called democratic liberalism, I kind of scurried over to libertarianism and said, I'm safe here in this little buoy, right? And then I was like, oh, wait a second. This is a problem, because this is basically just sitting right on the fence and saying, well, I don't really want to be a part of either. And from that position, you basically exacerbate this vacuum I'm speaking of, and AJ's speaking to, is that if this concept that's pushed by a lot of times someone like Ben Shapiro, who if someone took down a statue, he'd be like, well, I don't like the statue, but I would die for his right to take it down or to keep it up or whatever. And this is this myth of neutrality speaking that conservatives are supposed to go, well, no, that's how we're different. We're virtuous because we want you to be able to erect the statue. And what AJ's pointing to is something we're going to have to come up against sooner than later, is that we actually shouldn't disagree with certain blasphemy laws. Not the law itself. I mean, having them. I'm saying AJ's pointing something out really important, is that the left, progressivism, they will invert tradition, right? They don't want anything to do with traditionalism, but they want to be married. They don't want anything to do with traditionalism, but they want a family. They want a church, right?
Yeah.
They want affirmation of their identity.
Yeah.
They want this, they want that.
Or lose your job. Yeah.
Right.
Well-
And go ahead.
No,
You're gonna
I
say
think
something?
no, because your guys' point is very well put, and I share it. I think for those conservatives who do argue, not all of them, but a few of them who do argue in favor of this myth of neutrality, that where they're coming from is to say that, well, we don't want to be on the side of the fence that's getting oppressed should our political adversaries get into power. And so if we have power, if we have the executive branch and the judiciary and the legislative branch, we don't want to use that power to impose or to coerce our political adversaries to do something or believe something or go against their ideas or their beliefs. So in the same way that we don't want to be oppressed when they rise to power, we're not
argument
gonna
from
oppress them.
so you're saying they're arguing from avoidance of a precedent. So they're like,
Right.
well, I don't want to set the precedent because we're in this thing called a shitty, democracy, representative republic or whatever, where there's a seesaw where it's like we just take turns being in power. And
Right.
so they're basically going, well, no, I don't want my rule, even though I want that rule. I just don't want the rule to carry over to when you're in power. And that makes sense rationally, but that means that there's a bigger question, which is to say, well, maybe the system itself, this idealistic view of spreading democracy to the world, maybe that's the lie, right? Maybe the lie is plurality doesn't equal fairness, nor should it, nor would you expect it to. It actually, really, we're being sold this concept where America, again, to Ben Shapiro's rhetoric, it's always like America's so great because there's so many diverse people, and it's like we can all participate, and it's a lie because you can't all participate in the same way because you have to take turns holding hot potato called the government, the arm of the government, and what you get, it's like when you play a game, like you get to be the monster now, right, for 10 minutes, right? You chase everybody around, and then the buzzer goes, you're it. It's basically you're playing it. If you're government, the thing that actually kind of keeps your society in check and in functioning, right? If the law and everything else that follows is a game of hot potato, the left or the right couldn't have the potato long enough to actually really set down foundational bricks, right? And maybe that's the design, but the problem is I think the right side thinks that's good more than the left side. I think they go, well, no, it's designed that way so that people don't get too much power. And I go, well, if nobody gets power, you're just stuck in this gray sludginess of like Hake said, if culture, they always say policy is downstream from culture, and they never quite asked what's culture downstream from. Well, it's theology. It's your fundamental value sets, your ethics, philosophy, yeah. But it's never talked about, and it doesn't need to be talked about so long as the game of hot potato exists. So I don't. In America, especially, we're not cohesive in our ethics, in our ethnicity, in our background, in our languages. There's really nothing other than classical liberalism that sort of barely ties everybody together. If you're looking at it from right now, I'm not talking about the long history. It's not even that long. We're infants, but you know what I mean? There's no cohesion. We never coagulated into anything. But everybody's still going, well, at least we have a lot of assortment of people that we can all live together, and that's saying something. And I'm going, I don't know if that's saying anything, actually. I don't know if that's a good thing. That's just, I don't know. Hake, what do you think?
I don't think that Christians or conservatives or people of common sense have been in power for a long time, and Trump being quote unquote president didn't do a lot because he had his whole cabinet was undermining him. It's hard to find good helpers these days. The Senate has to approve, the Senate swamp has to approve these people, and I saw him as a sort of in Elon Musk, a liberal but with some common sense, who has in my opinion, his heart in the right place, loves the country. But we have this false religion of spreading democracy. We used to fight wars, I heard, to spread Christianity or to spread Islam. The Muslims did. Now they're spreading democracy, and
democracy is the religion, right?
Yeah, they're fighting. They're doing war welfare on Ukraine and killing Ukrainians and Russians in the process, and subsidizing Israel's war right now, which I don't think that Israel needs our help. I think that they can handle themselves. And now they're also the government is basically run by a bunch of liberals. The FBI, I think, the DOJ was founded to oppose the whites in the South who became the KKK and didn't like the carpetbaggers, didn't like blacks, some of them who were illiterate and being voted into office, kind of puppets of the union, puppets of the feds. So it's been the government has been kind of the enemy of the states' rights people, the local control, and they've been centralizing control for a long time. So we've been arguing from a place of weakness. Oh, we just want to go along to get along, because we're in a place of weakness. They could easily put us in gulags in the next generation or less. So I think that's why you see the Christians being like, oh, we want free speech, but we just want freedom to tell the truth.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty, yeah. It's like a minimal thing we want, but really we don't want. There's a threshold when we say free speech, of course, and I think people should be more honest when they call themselves free speech absolutists. They go, I don't think so. Hake, you brought up something interesting, and I'd love all of your takes on this. I haven't really thought about this until the last year and a half or something, because it was never accessible to me. I didn't really care either way, but I realized that now that not only the 19th Amendment, but just voting for everybody is supposed to be, we're supposed to just accept this. And I'm like, I actually don't agree with that. And that includes the possibility that me, myself, personally, couldn't have a vote. I would be fine with, because once I examine it and I go, was it ever really designed for everybody to be like, my vote matters? And it's like, well, okay, so I have an 18-year-old OnlyFans chick putting in, some direction, and so I don't know the arbitrary line, by the way. I don't know the answer to this, but I wanted to go around and just get your guys' sense of this.
She's contributing a lot to the gross national product
that's right. Yeah, if you go economic, if you go free market all the way, it's a good thing, right? Yeah. So what's your take on that? Because obviously, probably all three of you are way more well-versed historically, but there seems to be a problem, Hake, if we all agree, well, spreading democracy ends up being the new religion and voting is basically the ritual. So I wonder if one of the big missteps, unless it was purposeful, I'm a habitual conspiracy theorist. I wonder if that was directed as a destructive path, or was it like you said, did they mean well? Did they mean well, or is it actually like a well thought out way of unthreading society altogether? Because it gets the women out of the houses. You don't get people voting, or you get people voting and wearing a Nike lanyard with their CEO jobs instead of raising really good children. That's called mothering. So that splinters up. Oh, guess what? Their liberties now allow them to also get in debt. So now the wife and the husband have the liberty of sinking into debt. And it's all from this sense of liberty leading, right? And so I think voting would be an expression of liberty leading, and to the individual level, right? And what's your take on that? And not just women, but just voting in general. Like, what's going on?
I totally agree with that. I think that, for one, it's been destructive that women be worrying their pretty little heads about politics, and us and males in general too. Because people are fighting over team Republican, team independent, team conservative, team whatever. And then they're infighting on top of that about stuff that does not truly affect their lives, really. People are ignoring their own lives, arguing about politics and getting all caught up in politics. So that's been a problem. We saw with the mail-in ballots, they made it. Yeah, they made it easy for every idiot to vote. So these high propensity voters who really cared about stuff and actually went to the specific precinct that they had to go to on that specific day. Now they made it convenient. You could go to any precinct, at least how was it that way for me. And that's how we got the most secure election in history. 81 million votes for a guy who's barely
alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think? AJ, why don't you go ahead voting? What happened?
What's interesting about this? So you got to really understand it's not democracy that they're actually trying to push, right? Because democracy in Yemen is, if you were to poll the preferred type of government in Yemen, it would be a total Muslim Ayatollah, right? I mean, that's what democracy in their opinion isn't mob rule. It's not the amount of things that everybody would vote for. It's funny how democracy that we're exporting is nothing other than CRT, abortion, and transgenderism.
NATO.
Right.
It's not what everybody collectively gets together and decides what is best for their individual group of people. That's not the type of democracy that they are exporting. It's the religion of the left that they want to institute from the top down and re-educate upon society. So, and that's the problem with democracy in general. And that's why we've never been a democracy, even democratic republic. And we had this foundation, as we talked about before, of underlining Christian values and the underlining principles of morality and Christian virtue that undergirded freedom, was because if you get a group of people in Saudi Arabia or Yemen or Afghanistan together to determine what they can vote on, you'll be very surprised at what the common consensus is, and it looks nothing like the blue-haired feminists that we want to interject into their particular culture. So, that's the funny thing. But
maybe they would vote. Maybe they would vote their own right. I know women now are finally getting to the point where I just directly ask them, "Would you care if you just let's say they just said you can't vote anymore?" They'd be like, "I kind of be relieved." Chad, answer to the voting, but if you will for me, segue it in a way even back to civil rights if you can, because there's more going on, obviously, when we talk about liberties and then you customize liberties for certain peoples, right? And then that becomes the currency. So let's just get your take on voting, but I do want to segue into that because I think it is relevant.
No, I think you guys are right. I mean, and AJ touched on this just a moment ago, but when you look at our constitutional republic and you juxtapose that to, say, a monarchy, a government or a kingdom where you have the king and his nobles and then you have the peasants at the bottom, it's very easy for that king and his nobles to do just about anything they want without getting the opinion of the public. They can just push whatever they want. The so-called cabal or the elite class wouldn't even stop to think what will the peasants think of this.
Right.
Those people don't magically Those people don't magically go away. Those cabal, those elitists, they don't magically go away in a constitutional republic. They move more covertly and clandestinely. This is where you get social justice movements. The idea being to get people in the streets and make them think that the thing that they're fighting and arguing for is in their own best interest. And so it's my own doing that we now have this legislation and that legislation and that policy, not realizing that all they're doing is expanding the role of the federal government at the expense of their own, quote unquote freedom.
Right. They're given fake Harry Potter wands. Exactly. look what you did.
Exactly.
That's one of the things. That's one of the things I noticed about the blacks, for example, when they're crying about these
people of color.
Sorry, the POCs, those local racist incidents that happen. They appeal to the federal government. This is a hate crime, or the state government. This is a hate crime. Right. It's a local issue. And in general, it was totally on the up and up. but now they're going to the UN. They have the UN accusing the United States of violating blacks' human rights with the water that they messed up in Flint. And it's probably their own mismanagement anyway.
It is. It's totally their own mismanagement. But how civil rights plays into all of this is the communists were behind, in, and around the civil rights movement. It was a communist ploy. This is fully documented. Martin Luther King himself was a Marxist, full-blown Marxist. Everyone around him was a full-blown Marxist. The guy will go and give speeches. He'll get paid to deliver these speeches. He'll go and buy some white hookers. Well, he will send Ralph Abernathy to go and buy some white hookers, bring them back to the hotel room. They would all snort coke lines and have a good time. This is who Martin Luther King really was. And so the fact of the matter is, communists have long used black activism to really kind of push their subversive efforts in this country. And one of the biggest tenets of what they wanted was this kind of mass enfranchisement of the people. They wanted to give everyone the right to vote. And you even see them now arguing for prisoners and people under the age of 18 to have the so-called right to vote. And what this does is, to the extent that you get people who are otherwise disinterested in their community or their country, you get these people thinking that it's up to them to save this country and to
activism.
And it's up to you, and you're being a part of something. To the extent that they can communicate, these people, immigrants that are pouring over the border, communicate to them that they are part of something bigger than themselves by going and casting your vote for the most progressive politician in a given election. What this does is, again, it continues to feed into this ever expanding federal government that we have going on in their quest toward globalism, a global economy, a global society. And so again,
global citizen, your vote matters, right?
So these people have invested a lot of time, effort, and energy into the social sciences, into the cognitive sciences. They're understanding and learning human behavior, how we move individually versus how we move as groups, how we respond to hysteria, how we respond to all the things. And they're exploiting this. And so social justice movements play into this, and voting is a huge element in that whole kind of equation. So I don't agree that everybody should have the right to vote. I'm willing to compromise and say, okay, if you want the right to vote, you have to pass a litmus test to even register to vote. That's a compromise I'm willing to make. But other than that, no, not everybody should have the right to vote.
I think the religion, going back to the religion argument that we were talking about, is emotions. They're using the young people. They're full of this pride because they're so-called educated. The liberals have infiltrated, or the communists have infiltrated the education, the social media, the mainstream media, entertainment, and brainwashed young people who are the most passionate, a lot of time on
Idealist, right?
Yeah.
Idealist too, yeah.
That's why I was leery of the Hong Kong so-called democracy protests, because it was just a bunch of dumb students, communists versus communists. The communist students versus the communist Chinese government. It was, didn't Alexis de Tocqueville tour America in the early America and say that the government would figure out soon enough that you could bribe the people to vote away their rights, something to that effect? And that's what has happened in America. You want local control so that you can face the person who's violating your rights.
Right, yeah.
You don't want central control. Yeah. You can't even control Congress or the state level, or the county, really, or the city, much less the UN.
This is really interesting. Well, first, Chad, thanks for giving me an idea. I think I'm going to have to animate MLK Jr. Partying in a hotel. Line 'em up! I want to. So
can I touch on what?
Yeah. Go ahead, AJ.
Real quick. So what really kind of blackpilled me to this whole thing, to be honest, was partly some of your work, Chad. But I'm also I'm friends with MLK's niece, and she's an amazing pro-life advocate, pro-life voice. But what's so funny is people don't know that King literally marched with Margaret Sanger, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of
The
a lot of Black
Eliminator. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know, and this was told to me early on by a Black pro-life activist that I know. But there was two Black organizations that were pro-life before Roe v. Wade, and this is going to shock you. But can you guys guess what who they were?
Pre Roe
Pre-Roe.
Wade advocates.
Pre-Roe. Yep, two pro-life
Um,
Black organizations.
Pro-life.
Yes.
You are you going to say are you going to say the Black Panthers? Are you going
Black
to say that?
Panthers and the NAACP, believe it or not,
Yeah.
were completely pro-life because they realized, they knew all along that that there was this huge eugenic play that has been in, high levels of influence and power in the American institutions for forever, right? This eugenic play with Margaret Sanger, Lothrop Stoddard, who Lothrop Stoddard, I believe, was a cousin or nephew to Charles Darwin. So this was social Darwinistic theory that there's this long lineage of evolutionary model in which the Aryan race is farthest along on the evolutionary timetable, and so we need to get rid of the inferior stock, of which were disabled people, Black people, and all different types of people of color, obviously. But Margaret Sanger was behind this the entire time, and the Black Panthers knew this. They preached against this, and it's very, very interesting and very ironic that the person that was propped up as the great person of the civil rights was MLK, when MLK was not, you had to demonize the Black Panthers because they had a strong family ethic, because they believed in the Second Amendment, because they believed in subversively. They didn't stand for the dissolution of the Black family, and they believed in individual family units and strong family structure. And so there's this guy who's totally, I mean, as Christians, I don't know if most of us here, although I don't think Jesse Lee Peterson is as a Trinitarian, but that's the other thing about this from a Christian perspective. MLK denied the bodily resurrection of Christ. He totally denied the Trinity. There's very good evidence to believe that the day he was shot, he had spent the night with two hookers the night before. This is the person that is propped up by the elites and all. It just really gets you to understand.
Sounds like Obama. Except the hookers are men.
Right? Why is it always what the elites are pushing is sex, eugenics, the destruction of the family? And what can we learn from this as to how to reverse engineer this sexual revolution and the plight that we're in? Because if I was going to steel man guys like James Lindsay or Michael Fallon, they're like, look, there's a coming totalitarian regime that is ready to put us all in prison, right? And so they're like, maybe the thing that we should not mess with first is the First Amendment. Like, I get that, right? I totally understand that there's an order to getting us out of this hell that we've all found ourselves in. But that doesn't completely give us the license to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as if we should accept this pluralistic, total materialistic atheist regime without trying to really underscore and fight for the only objective universal values by which we can actually run a society, and that's the biblical revelational epistemology.
Well, when it comes to the Black Panthers being pro-life, I don't need a bunch of beret wearing lunatics running around telling me not to kill my baby. I mean, all it takes is character and principles for me to know not to do that. The Black Panthers They were a through and through Marxist organization. They too were famous for having a lot of sex orgies there in California, and hitting lines of coke. And so it's like, again, these people, whether you're talking about whether you're talking about like the Black Panthers, which America deemed radical, which in my opinion, and I have enough evidence to back this opinion definitively, is the whole purpose of Black Power, which actually didn't start in the 70s. It started, I would say, in 66. But the whole purpose of this radical Black Power movement was to make Martin Luther King and his contingent, by comparison, seem more moderate and thus more mainstream, so that Americans will be tempted to go along with his kind of campaign or plan for making America a better place, when the whole thing was bogus. Martin Luther King was in agreement with your Stokely Carmichaels and a lot of your Marxian radicals who belong to the Black Power movement. In fact, a lot of the people who are part of the Black Panther Party today, or back then, who are still living, are all for abortion and even going up to infanticide. And so I think that being pro-life for the Black Panther movement was merely a trend. It wasn't something that was a true principle to the core of what they believed. Because if it was, then how do you go so quickly to the other side of the equation, to where now you are supporting abortion and being upset that Roe v. Wade was overturned? And so these people aren't principled in what they believe. They just want to destruction. They're nihilistic in that regard.
That's human nature. That's really human nature, man. Look at the public opinion on so-called same-sex marriage before and after the so-called Supreme Court forced it down our throats. It's not politics is downstream from culture. It's also
both and.
It's also brainwashing from the government. And so people do not have solid values in general. That's human nature. And the communists, the liars, will pretend to be reasonable. And Obama himself, he's like, "Oh, I believe marriage is traditional." Bite it. But Hannity, Jesse Lee Peterson, they all
say it to get in the door. You say it to get in the door, right?
He was for so-called same-sex marriage before he ever ran for president, but he claimed not to be. Same thing. Biden came out in favor of same-sex marriage before Obama came out in favor of same-sex marriage, but they're liars.
Yeah.
Chad, what about the other dude with the glasses? Was he better or just a different arm piece?
Malcolm X? No, he wasn't any better. He was. The thing is, people like to say that, well, kind of close to the end of his life, he came to the realization that the Nation of Islam was just as scandalous, just as greasy as the other institutions and organizations. But here's a man who hosted Fidel Castro and spoke very highly of Castro. Here's a man who had Marxist ideology himself. And not only that, he didn't believe in God. He believed in some fake Islamic version of God. And so the thing is, I pray or I hope that he repented before he died, although I seriously doubt that he did. I think he was more level-headed than Martin Luther King insofar that he was willing to speak out against some of the nameless, faceless people who were behind the whole civil rights movement. And you see a lot of conservatives kind of recycling some of those talking points today, specifically Malcolm X's take on the white liberal and this, that, and the third. They never play those clips all the way through, by the way. But
wait, just a correction. You're saying Malcolm, right? Not MLK. Malcolm, the Fox and the white liberal. Yeah, the subversive Fox, right? Yeah.
Right. But I mean, as far as like speaking from the heart, I will give it to Malcolm X that he was he more often than not was speaking from what he truly believed. Although I disagree with a great deal of what he believed. He was speaking from what he truly believed, whereas Martin Luther King was a concoction. He never wrote any of his speeches. He plagiarized his way through college. He to the point that you and Hake made, was willing to say the necessary things that need to be said in order to get into the good graces of the public, to win the public's trust, And once the public trust was won to support policies and regulation that set America back, that didn't help as far as race relations are concerned. Race relations can only be gone about on the ground peer-to-peer level with people familiarizing themselves with each other in the free market. That's the only way that race relations can really progress.
Yeah.
But giving the power to the government to force people to integrate, that only causes more friction than
Chad. Can I ask you? So I have a friend who, and I used to go to a church in South Central, but he used to talk about, my pastor used to talk about how, and I'm not saying this, but he said that segregation actually, like ending segregation, actually devastated the Black community because of the fact that there was community, right? The Black owned businesses, they all stuck together. They all did commerce with one another. They all looked after one another, and ending segregation and the government forcing from the top down this integration actually was something that set the Black community back. Very, very much. So,
that's what made rap possible, by the way. Before it was just like jazz and like bebopping and stuff, and then they were like, "Hey, by the way," so that didn't help.
Even that music was subversive. All the doo-wop,
right? Yeah, even jazz. Yeah, all the jazz was subversive. Yeah, it was.
No, but you're right, AJ. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jimbo.
No, go ahead.
No, you're right. I mean,
Chad's so polite, man. He just like never speaks up around anyone.
I spoke with a number of older Black folks, including Jesse Lee Peterson, who were Southerners during Jim Crow. And they said, yeah, after Martin Luther King and his little speech and this legislation, everything just went downhill. So this is the opinion of people on the ground, but what's taught in schools, the running narrative is that Martin Luther King was so great for America because he taught us how not to be racist. And it's interesting when white people in particular tell me how great Martin Luther King was and how he made everything better. I asked them, I was like, oh, so without Martin Luther King, like you'd be racist? Well, no. Well, that's basically what you're saying. You're telling me that Martin Luther King taught you how not to be racist. So without Martin Luther King, you would be a racist. And this whole word racism is BS, because really what it is Black people being encouraged to be degenerates in public, and people recoiling away from that degeneracy and that decadence. So it's the decadence, the degeneracy, or what they associate with decadence, the degeneracy that people are recoiling away from. And to the extent that the people recoil, you can call that racism. And if there's anything that white people hate, is to be called a racist, especially baby boomer white folks. Baby boomers are afraid of being called racist if they're white. If they're Black, they're afraid of being called coons and Uncle Toms. And so they kind of acquiesce and fall into line so they don't be accused of being a racist or an Uncle Tom.
They're really brainwashed with that stuff. They're really traumatized with that. Oh, you don't compare anything to slavery and you don't compare anything to the Holocaust. Those are the two worst things that you can
shields. Those are narrative shields.
Compare anything to. And it doesn't matter how conservative and Christian and common sense the boomers are. They fall for it. It's
Which
crazy.
Is all I do as a pro-life activist, right? Is
like,
bring
I know, of course.
The correlations, right? The fact that 40% of the Black community is being lynched, literally lynched in the womb and sold to the American public as progress.
Yeah.
It's just utterly disgusting.
I have a few questions. Go ahead.
By the way, I don't mean to boomer bash. I'm just
me neither. I love boomers.
I love boomer bashing.
If I love anyone, I love boomers.
Yeah. If I love to bash anyone, it's boomers.
Somebody made the boomers the way they are.
That's true. That's true. Went to the moon, damn it. Yeah.
You know, Margaret Sanger, is it true that she was only for sterilization and not for actual abortion? Is that true? I've heard that.
It's funny. Like, people don't realize that, like, there was 70,000 Americans in the turn of the 20th century that were forcibly sterilized in America because they were seen as unfit. You know, so that was very much something that American populace accepted, that there was, whether you were disabled, whether you were an underclass, whether if you were deemed to be unfit, you were forcibly sterilized, and that was all pushed through the same rotten seed that gave fruit to the sexual revolution and this whole eugenic movement, parroted by Margaret Sanger and those who helped her. So it and by the way, also, founding one of the board members early on, I believe was a founding board member, was Bill Gates' father or grandfather.
Yep.
Was all founding board members of Planned Parenthood, which was called the Birth Control League at the time. But birth control was the Trojan horse by which they pushed, really pushed, and the whole Negro Project. I don't know if you're aware of that, Chad, but the Negro Project was a project that Planned Parenthood pushed in order to sell, because they all knew what she was up to. The Black community knew what she was up to. And so, quote unquote, the Negro Project was her attempt to, she needed to use the Black minister in order to be a front puppet to parrot her ideas, to get the Black community to accept it.
And by the way,
we do not want to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro Project.
No, you're right. The idea for the Negro Project didn't actually originate with Margaret Sanger. It originated with W.E.B. Du Bois, who advised her, if you want to get to the Negro Southerner, you do so through the Negro minister. And so she then, kind of initiated that whole Negro Project. But again, you have to have character and you have to have values in order to not fall for this kind of propaganda. And so as much as I want to blame Margaret Sanger and even W.E.B. Du Bois, and even the pastor for that matter, at the end of the day, if you are going to collectivize yourselves in such a way that you're listening to this Negro pastor and this white socialist woman, to go along with sterilizing yourself or getting rid of your own baby, that's a value and a character a defect on your part. So I think that we live in an age where everybody's trying to find a boogeyman and trying to find a bad guy. And I'm not saying that you're doing that, but the reality is, at the end of the day, the Bible says to not be taken advantage or taken captive by hollow and deceptive philosophies. Or it says in another place to test every spirit to see if it's of God. And so if you're allowing this propaganda and this marketing to get you to go against what's right, then that's more of a you problem than it is Margaret Sanger's problem. I think it's worth acknowledging who she was, what she stood for, whether it be sterilization or abortion. But at the end of the day, the fact that it was able to work so effectively is due in large part to the fact that we as a people are morally bankrupt.
Yeah, I totally agree. You blame the user every bit as well. You blame the user for his wrong, and you blame the dealer, if you will, for his or her wrong. So did they just not have abortion that much, or sterilization was more like a permanent solution? I was just curious about that sterilization versus abortion thing, and if abortion just became way more common more recently, or if it was happening even back then much at all.
People were getting abortions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was no, go ahead. I mean, it was just back alley abortions, and you could get them. You had to pay big money for them, and there's a common misconception that abortion wasn't even legal before. New York was doing abortions way before Roe v. Wade. It just kind of depended on the state. So people did have abortions, but it was a eugenics push, and that's where the whole sterilization component came in.
You mentioned the sexual revolution increased or came out of partly the sterilization thing. It definitely increased too, according to an article I read from John R. Lott Jr., Dr. John R. Lott Jr., PhD. He said that sex out of wedlock, children out of wedlock increased after Roe v. Wade because it was understood that women could just get an abortion. So it was a shame to get pregnant out of wedlock, but then you could just, because then you're going to have to go through with the child.
Yeah.
in
You
general.
create the problem and you sell the solution, right?
Yeah. Did, go ahead before I get to my next question. Did I argue with people about this? Richard Spencer, some people in my chat. Did abortion decrease or increase Black violence? I know that abortion is Black violence, or in the case of Black.
It's such a racist thing. I mean, I should let Chad.
No, I want to hear you first.
Like
you started. Go for it.
Too much. But it's such a racist. When people bring this up, it's such a racist thing to say, because it's like, you're assuming there that Black people are inherently violent. Therefore, if you make them responsible for their children, that they're going to, like, who's overrepresented here in violence? Like, it's in
lesbians.
So
there's a lot of domestic violence in lesbian households.
Fundamentally, it's such a racist thing to say, and it's irrelevant to whether we should get rid of abortion. So it's like a lot of people use this as an example, as some type of a point to use to as to whether or not we should allow abortion. But if the fundamental problem is like, if abortion is killing a human being, if there's an uptick in violence from more 3-year-olds, the solution isn't to allow killing 3-year-olds.
Right. It's the old chopping the wean off will stop, grape from happening, which is actually true, right? But it's like, what's this cost benefit analysis we're doing, where you're like, we actually figured out a way to stop grape altogether. The baby's born and you just literally lop it off. It can't, you got to be creative now. So yeah, it's an interesting, and go ahead.
Did you say, so by that, do you mean circumcision decreases rape?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Curious. I mean off. I mean fully expressed. From progressive standards. So yeah, the whole I was going to bring this up because the level of when Hake, you were talking about how suddenly you introduce these new technologies and then the women go, oh great, I could just do this thing. And now that's on the men too, right? So the man leads, the women follows. So if men are leading by promiscuity and that's what they value, the women are going to follow that and provide that in a sense. But it's interesting from the technological perspective, because what I see, and Chad, you pointed this out because you used the word specifically, decadence and luxury really challenge human beings. Even probably all of us on the panel at some magnitude, our ethical stances. If it's convenient, we're drawn in. We're drawn in by convenience. I will do X or not do X so long as I keep my job. It could be as simple as that. But specifically in the deletion of babies department, making things so accessible allows you to lie to yourself that there's no consequences. And this is why ultimately utilitarianism fails, because you can't really account for the variable of, let's say, the weight of sin, the weight of the moral weight that's involved with eliminating a life. You can't deal with that in the utility sense. You can't map it on because it's not materialistic. And these things are always kind of looked away at because people in a state of convenience and decadence are mostly led by utility. They just go, well, if I get this, then I can do this. If I get this, I can do this. And that's why a Christian ethical system would necessarily influence not just policy, but just the way people engage with their own life. If there was can you imagine the level of shame and guilt that if used on abortion, that was used on not getting a jab or not wearing the mask? Remember that? You remember 3 years of utter direct shame, almost harassment in a lot of cases. That kind of passion for their blasphemy laws is something missing on the right, where we just kind of go, well, I don't want to be that guy. And you go, okay, well, someone else is going to be that guy, and they're going to actually use their blasphemy laws, their customs, their ethical program. And even if it's bankrupt logically, they're going to do it. So the question is, who's going to do it, right? Who's going to work harder at at administering and deploying their ethical norms, not just legally, but socially. And the social part is really missing from the quote conservative movement, because they always say, well, I'm economically conservative, socially, I'm liberal or whatever. And this is a weakness. This is foul. You can't separate, by the way, you can't separate ethics from the free market system. If someone does, oh, well, I just want a free market, do what you will, do as thou wilt in your own house. That's not a good standard. That's not a strong standard for a man, for a father, to do that. So there's a lot of other issues here, but I just wanted to bring in modernity because all of us have strong ethical stances, and I wondered if anyone's thought about this. You can speak on it. To what extent you battle with modernity, technology, influencing what you do, and how do you where do you come up against challenges in your ethics, right? Are you challenged at all by it, or are you just waiting for the time where you're really pressed, like on a moral dilemma? Modernity versus your ethics, like convenience of things that you're actively working against in a way, but you're ironically participating in, like tech, like we're all on a show right now. Where this leads might not be good if we don't take a position on where it leads, right? So I wonder if you guys ever come up against this, think about it. Does it bother you at all?
I definitely do. I think about it. I think about how life is just so comfortable. And especially once you develop some good habits for yourself, life gets sort of easier. God even made a lot of these commandments so that your life would go pretty well. But if you start putting your trust in your life going well, then you forget about God. And this happened with the Israelites all the time throughout the Bible. Stuff would become fine, and the men would get soft and start worshiping other women and other gods. Mm-hmm. So definitely think about how this cushy life has been spoiling. And then there's a bunch of immigrants who come in and take advantage of the opportunities that a lot of spoiled real Native Americans like us don't take advantage of. And some of these people taking advantage of these opportunities are not honest, and they don't have the freedom of speech, freedom especially to tell the truth and carry guns and all that, and Christian values that we claim to have. Mm-hmm. So we lose it. We lose the country.
Right. Anyone else on tech, tension between tech and ethics for you guys? You don't have to.
Go ahead, Chad. I could say something, but go for it.
Well, I mean, I guess what I thought of just with your question is an essay that Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote to a similar question that was posed well back in the 1700s. Specifically, what was the question? The question was something, I'm going to butcher it, but it had something to do with, has an Enlightenment way of thinking advanced or progressed society? Because as you know, what a lot of the Enlightenment thinkers were thinking and talking about was the place for doctrine or theology in the public square. Of course, many of your Enlightenment thinkers believed that theology and doctrine had no place in the public square. How they thought that rather we should think more in terms of scientific
rationality, rationality. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so has this advanced society? And to everyone's surprise, his response was no. Actually, men are weaker. We are less ethical, and things of this nature. So it's interesting to see the same things kind of happening today. People like to think about our generation juxtaposed to generations gone by, where the men were stronger and society was more ethical. But really, this kind of rapid decline has always existed, and it's just we're dealing with it in different ways due to technological advances that we are experiencing now that they didn't experience back then. And so I think it is changing our relationship with ethics, and this is why it's important to be principled which is a word that I continue to use throughout this panel, throughout this production tonight. But you use the word duty versus utility, and the fact of the matter is, and this, I harken back to the conversation that we had last panel with Austin Peterson, and I kept asking him, are you postmodernist? Like, what's your deal? And he said that he's an agnostic. I said, well, it seems to me very strange that on the one hand you say that you're a revolutionary, but then on the other hand you say that you're an agnostic, and it seems to me that your agnosticism is exactly what our public school system wants you to be, wants our children to be, lacking belief in anything, let alone God, believing that truth is fluid, reality is fluid. You can just come up with whatever you want and just go that direction. I'm a millennial, and our generation was certainly taught that you can be whatever you want to be. Everybody gets a trophy. And this, I think, has really shaped the way that we think. And we do kind of go the way of this whole modernity thing, as opposed to having any kind of ethics or principles.
Yeah, they actually make belief itself a weakness. That's what they teach now, unless it's in yourself, right? The ultimate inversion of making yourself Christ. But they, believe in yourself, but anything else is the weakest form of epistemology. You're like, really? So that's a contradiction. They're like, yeah, believe that you can have contradictions too. It's totally fine. Yeah, it's gone down the drain. Go ahead, AJ.
Well, I was just going to say, technology, obviously, and the question really is is technology just a tool like every other tool, or is it, does it so reshape and restructure society that we actually have to question whether or not we should even participate? Sometimes I wonder, you think about the fact that we've mentioned pornography. Never before in all of human history have men had this level of temptation, right? So every single type of debauchery, you have unlimited amount of virtual whores at your fingertips in the privacy of whatever room, and the little cell phone that you have at your fingertips at all times, 24/7. Are we even meant to be able to face this type of temptation in this? So I think technology is an amazing tool. It is a tool. Any tool can be used for idolatry, right? It's not inherently evil in and of itself. But I've also found that with almost every advancement of technology, there also comes another technological advancement that can be
Disrupts.
used as a safeguard for these, So I personally, there's probably tons of guys, just given the fact this is posted on YouTube, very male audience, that are listening to this, that have struggled with that. I personally, in my marriage, I do not, I have technological safeguards on every single one of my devices, because I don't want to be given that type of temptation, because it can ruin me, and so that's safeguards that I've used. But it does, when you look at the happiness scales of people like in Amish communities, or people that have completely disconnected themselves from technological advancement, there can be a case made there that definitely in reference to community and family dynamics. I was thinking about my friend. I have a friend from Burma, and how much more of a family oriented literally every other culture outside of the West is, that are really disconnected from these tools of isolation that technology, cell phones, the digital age has brought us. I don't know if it's a net negative, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it enhances it, but I guess it doesn't go away. It's like the Amish, you could say, some of them have phones or whatever, but even without phones, it's they still have access to the pigs in the barn and stuff. And, you can't ever get away from what it is we're fundamentally talking about, which is from a Christian view, we do have a fallen aspect to us, that the world is worldly and we're called to be in the world, not of it. So whether it's tech, whether it's lust, whether it's greed, any of the things we're drawn to by the world, the whispers of the world try to draw us into materialism. We're all dealing with the same battle. And it's just that when you remove that battle as a premise from schools, they don't have that premise. They have like an activist premise. Like they swapped out the spiritual problem of combating your own evil and sin, right? They swapped it with some sort of utility evil. Like, look at the unfairness, like when I went through my classical liberal phase, I'd read Thomas Sowell, and he had a book called Cosmic Justice, which is still very applicable because this concept of justice absent God, it just means materialism. So the funny part about the title is that if you follow that logic through, that means that there's a justice or injustice out in space, literally, like actually, like it would be a logical follow. If there's a social justice, there's a city level justice. There's and so
environmental.
Yeah, environmental justice. So this is genius on the subverter side, because if you can get a person to swap out their Christian morality that's written in their hearts with a materialistic lens of injustice from the utility view, you can basically feed them justice, gumballs for the rest of their life if they don't get shaken out of it. And that's what parenting is. AJ, you said you had something to say about Jesse Lee Peterson, and maybe we can have a confrontation.
Yeah, before I go there,
Hake.
can I just push back on a little bit of what you just said?
Sure.
So I guess my pushback there would be like, in our modern day youth, they're saying now the latest poll is like almost a third of young people under the age of 20 are identifying as transgender. And so my question would be like, how many of the Amish people that are completely divorced from this technocratic top-down pushing of this ideology on society are struggling with that or even thinking about that?
They're not.
And it's not, this is not this whole transgender movement and homosexuality to a lesser extent is not a grassroots movement that's built itself up from the bottom up. That's fighting for against inequality and systemic issues of injustice. This is a technocratic ideological subversion of the culture that is being pushed on the youth. And it's done so through TikTok. It's done so through Instagram. It's done so through the algorithms that these young kids are looking at and engaging in. And I think a huge argument could be made that it's past a point where almost of no return here. So in reference to Jesse Lee Peterson, I don't know. Before you go
into that, because I love what you guys are talking about right here, and then I also want to take a break quickly.
And I also got pee. But
same. That's what I mean. Book bans won't work, you boomers. You're talking about social media.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, we need to ban these books in the school libraries. Like anybody reads. Give me a break.
No, it's a good point. You can't do that approach, and it's so invasive. The good news, though, AJ, is that because the phenomenon doesn't affect the people who don't have access as much, right? If not at all, virtually, maybe a little bit. That means, so the bad news is that the tech enables it to some extent, but the good news is that it's a trend that's enabled by tech, and so. It's not, even though it is a spiritual war, it is good and evil, but that's kind of the good news, is that you can look at it and go, well, in a funny way, it's not as cute as I wish it was. It's just that in our day, when we were kids, the thing that was trending was whether or not you were like a prep or a skater, right? Or or a wannabe black guy, right? We had a word for that growing up, but here it's like, oh, I'm a this, I'm a that, and you can watch it and you're disgusted, and it's truly evil from where it's coming from. But I suppose there is light at the end because of what you said, is that it's trend. It's not actually reflecting the true reality of things. And the good news about kids, which is also bad news depending on how you're parenting, is that they do rebel. And so if the religion, like Hake said, is the, justice, democracy for all, liberty above everything, I get to identify whoever I want. Mm-hmm. Eventually, there's a generation of kids that actually go through the rebellious state. And instead of rebelling against the church, as we all must have did, maybe all of us at some point in our idealistic teenage years and so on, these kids are they will rebel against a different church. And I'm kind of looking forward to that part. But you guys go pee.
That's an optimistic view of that, and I hope you're right. However, it's not just this trend that is divorced from a whole agenda that's behind it. I mean, there is a huge agenda from the pharmaceutical industry. There's a huge agenda from and the very echelons of power in America that is influencing legislation, from bathrooms to girls in locker rooms to females in biological males or just real males in sports, and then I mean this is affecting real people, right? So right now, Prop 1 passed in California, which was a referendum from democracy, right?
Of course,
to institute a constitutional amendment that would enshrine abortion to the day of birth. But also what it did was included in reproductive health care, the definition of reproductive health care to mean the right to sterilization. Yeah. The right to sterilization. So literally these ideologues are pushing legislation that gives right, and it's obviously has a huge agenda with the pharmaceutical industry that's making millions and millions of dollars off of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers and surgeries. But it's redefining reproductive health care, enshrining those into the day of birth, and eroding parental rights. So if think about this, if you have a right to reproductive health care, and in that right is defined as the right to sterilization, then no one can discriminate against that state enshrined right of that individual, including age discrimination. So we are seeing young kids getting put on puberty blockers, being put on hormone replacement therapy. Planned Parenthood itself is marketing hormone replacement therapy openly on their website to children as young as 14, and nothing but legislation is stopping them from doing it without parental consent. And so I think we got to also realize that with this is coming a lot of legislation behind it that is affecting change. James's point. He had said to mention Obergefell. I mean, think about the fact that Obergefell was the Supreme Court decision that enshrined the right to gay marriage. That was 2015. That was not even 10 years ago. And the majority of Americans were against gay marriage in 2015 when Obergefell passed. It was passed from the top down on the states. The majority of Americans disagreed with it. That didn't matter to these people who were trying to institute it. However, now look at where our culture is, right? So we always talk about politics being downstream of culture, but it works the other way around too. Obergefell gay marriage is that prime example. Look, the battle for conservatives isn't even gay marriage anymore and homosexuality.
Right.
It's not even something that's even being fought. I mean, when you go to these conservative conventions, you have gays against groomers. It's an open practice that's accepted in it's like driving out Satan with Satan, right?
That's funny. That's hilarious. Like rapist against assault or something. Right?
It just proves the fact though that legislation influences the human heart. The law is a tutor and instructs the human heart and the conscience of right and evil, and that is right and wrong, and that's also influencing culture as we see it. So
yeah, no, I agree. I think that that's back to the point about the meat of this talk in the middle was like this assumption from the right side of things that, you know, they don't want to be like the left and take over government. That's how we're different. This is a failure. And everything AJ just said, you cannot battle this, right? As optimistic as I am, just looking at it as trends, you can't battle it without getting into policy and getting rid of this notion, this meek notion that you ought not bring your very bigoted views. No, bigoted means to basically cut away other views, right? But, you know, now they say, you know, yeah, that's good. I call it base bigotry. It's like, well, I guess in the definition it says unreasonable, but who's to determine what's unreasonable? I just assume bigotry has been used just like every other shield, right? A label is to basically smear you, and it's scared all of these soft classical liberal conservatives into the corner saying, well, I just don't want to be like the left. I'm just going to make fun of them, but I'm not like that. And you go, that's the problem. Why do you think they've taken over everything? It's because you're not acting like them. Now, acting the way they're acting, right? Not their personal behaviors. I'm not saying that. The way they're operating by infiltrating is what the right side needs to do. And we're already losing that battle, right? And so,
like, I don't even know what these terms even mean anymore. Like classical liberalism, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
or like, what is natural law? What does that even mean anymore? I mean, the type of classical liberalism and natural law that existed in the 1700s thought it was okay for Anthony Comstock to limit the mail system to prohibit people from sending their loved ones, their wives and you know, and significant others pornography in private letters. I mean, in abortifacients and also birth control. I mean, that was the type of classical liberalism that existed in that day. I don't even know what that means anymore, because people who are arguing for classical liberalism now are arguing for the type of classical liberalism that would be which we should all look and turn a blind eye to Drag Queen Story Hour.
Right.
To me, it's like, okay, if that's what has been co-opted and redefined, then I want to argue for something other than that. Call it theocracy, call it whatever you want to call it, but I'm not going to sit by as a man and let little children be freaking groomed by pedophiles, right? Especially when they're
AJ, you could call it, just to be safe in your appearances and whatnot. I think it's still safe to run with Christian populism, because the other term, even though I think it's perfectly fine, by the way, is flagged often, and it's harder to smear the populism because the opposition are also in a sense populist in a sense. They just have a different sample set of people. Hake, do you need to go potty, or do you have a Hake report catheter?
I gotta get up myself.
Okay,
I gotta get up myself.
All right, me and Chad will chat. Yeah, be back. Yeah. I forgot I was going to ask you, Chad. It escaped me. Any other questions? You guys in the chat, be sure to ask some questions if you want. Logan Daly gifted 5 Made by Jimbob memberships. Thank you, Logan. I really appreciate that. Face Palmer as well, 5 gifted memberships. Wicked Wally coming in hot with another dad pun, $5. I guess that means degenerates are vice principled. That's correct. Brody Alexander, JLP is trying to join the panel. Yeah, I'm going to surprise Hake here with my buddy. First person, JLP is waiting in the lobby. That is correct. We're gonna have AJ confront JLP, and Hake, being his second man, is going to have to defend until I bring up the man himself. Draconian Method, thank you so much, member, for 4 months. The Hake Report, Hake, why do you dangle your feet under the desk? Why is there to be so happy? Yeah, he has to pee. That's why. We know. Great panel. Logan, I want to read this again. $5. Thank you. The only true freedom is that from sin. Yes, discipline. All others are slavery to flesh and demons. That's correct. They inverted freedom I think they did a pretty good job. Repackaging freedom. NG Benji, $5. Favorite anime? I don't watch anime. I do like some cartoons for the aesthetic to learn how to do shadows and stuff. Serena Donnelly, thank you for becoming a member. And Shill Bix, thank you for also becoming a member. And when Hake comes back, we will certainly look at the contention AJ has with JLP, and maybe we can get some fireworks. Because it wouldn't be a mixed bag unless there was just a tiny little, even a bank snap, yeah. What do you got there? Chardonnay?
No, little
That's
high
Scotch.
West
That's
bourbon.
Scotch. Bourbon, nice.
I'm not a Scotch fan. I don't like the peat. I'm more of a bourbon kind of sword.
Yeah. Nice.
I have a couple ways I can go with this Jesse Lee Peterson thing.
It won't matter, actually, just so you know.
No.
However you go, it won't matter, and you'll understand. Okay, Hake's here, and now Hake, you might not even need to defend him. He's just going to air his grievance real quick. AJ,
Cool.
Go ahead.
Well, so I'm from Southern California. I'm from Los Angeles. So I know. So I had several friends that went to Jesse Lee Peterson's church. By the way, James, do you go to his church? Or are you?
Yeah, that's how I found him, was through his church.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So I have friends who actually worked, I think, in the very position that you worked in. They were his producer, and then several members of his church. No, I could go through a moral question dynamic, or I could go through the theological.
Why don't you just ask him yourself?
He's here.
Yeah.
Welcome. Can you hear me?
Oh my goodness gracious.
Can you hear me?
Hey Jesse, how are you, sir?
We can hear you, sir.
I am amazing. I'm doing great. I am wondering though, I turn on my favorite YouTube, Made by Jimbob, and I see James Hake. He's supposed to be teaching Wing Chun classes right now at Barnhouse to give out the burrito belts. And I don't know what the is going on. Hake, what are you doing? Are you cheating on me?
Indeed. I'm on Made by Jimbob's show.
I'm taking him away.
This is going to require some discipline.
I'm doing spiritual karate.
Can't believe this is happening. Wow.
Spiritual karate. Oh my. Beta. That's beta karate. That is not. Are you a lesbian?
Not far from that. Maybe spiritually. Maybe
A spiritual lesbian. What the? What the?
English.
Maybe Jesse, you have some questions for AJ. He was going to come at you, but I mean, you're now in the position. So I mean, I don't know if you want to do a reversal here.
Well, this question no one has ever asked me say before, but do you love white people? Do you love white people?
No, most white people I do not love, Jesse.
You don't love
Christian.
Do you love the blacks? You know the blacks.
I like the black person on the program. Do we get to see your face, Jesse?
That is his face. It looks the same. It doesn't matter if it's video or not. It's the same.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. Technology these days, you can make people do whatever they want. I could look like Maxine Waters, Wicked Witch of the West, if I wanted to.
Really good Jesse Lee Peterson impression. I'll tell you that.
What are you talking about? What the? What the?
AJ, do you want to ask him a sharp, hard-hitting question right now? I mean, you're about to, so.
Jesse
Bring
Lee
the
Peterson,
thunder.
Please enlighten all of us. Are you a homosexual?
Now, when a man with a hole in the side of his head big enough to eat cereal out of, who sleeps with his brother's wife, make accusations baseless, there were no texts, there were no emails, or nothing. They got nothing. What do you think?
Fair enough.
I don't know. I don't know. I have some very trusted friends who I knew would not lie that have come forward and have testified to this. These
Well,
allegations.
I got a question to you. I don't
Yeah,
sin. I
would
don't
imagine
sin.
you
Do they sin?
Man, you got me there.
Checkmate, my friend.
Jesse, I have a question for you from a super chat here, $4 from Anonymous. What are
Bring
your
it
opinions?
on.
What are your opinions on Trump wanting Alabama to reinstate IVF? Women should marry young to have children, not eliminate embryos to get pregnant over 30. What do you think about that?
I don't really like IVF so much as like doing the old-fashioned way. You know, back in my day, you couldn't just like turkey base your way out of trouble.
Right. That makes sense.
But I don't got a problem with like somebody dating a younger woman.
Uh-huh.
But
Well,
as long as it ain't crazy, you know, like you gotta be legal and go get jail.
right. I'm sorry, Chatty maybe went to the bathroom, but I thought maybe you'd have some question about him too.
Well, Chad and James are gone. I do have a question about the Trinity and why you deny the deity of Christ.
Who was Jesus praying to? See, owing Benjamins, the guy that owed everybody Benjamins, he would ask the same question, and I was not satisfied with the answer. So, who is Jesus praying to? He said he only did as the Father, told him. So, that are you your dad? Are you your dad?
So
No,
the diaper argument.
I'm not my father.
I don't like the diaper argument. Honestly, that was kind of beta.
Well, what if we said the father hoodly daddle?
Yeah.
You have a problem? What's the problem?
Who's hoodly dad? What the?
I mean, sorry, Jesse.
You're asking that guy to make an argument that he don't even believe in.
Anything else, Jesse? I know you're very busy.
Well, I just hope Hake gets into third gear for these Wing Chun lessons at Barnhouse so we can get the party started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get retarded in here.
All right. Okay.
Man, that was
Thanks,
awesome.
Jesse.
Thank
Appreciate
you so much
that.
for orchestrating that.
Kid,
that was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't. You never know when he's going to do it. By the way, let's see. Actually, I don't want your guys' opinion on
mouth.
your guys' opinion on Trump. I don't even have an opinion anymore. I think like there was this moment I went through like a cycle where I was like, okay, cool. Someone who talks, loud and is not afraid to say things and then get ridiculed. But then it was like the fast pace, warp thing that was bothersome. So I kind of just stopped listening, honestly. And I wanted to ask you guys, to what extent is it our duty to participate in national level politics, like following the things? Because I look at my life and I go, I know there's a near one-to-one participation at the local level. I know I can influence, like Hake said, I can find the person who's the leader. I could literally stand in front of them and say, you, like that. You can't do that at the national, maybe even at a larger state level. It's harder. So I wondered, is it, I don't like to take the full truther game where it's like, dude, the whole thing's a charade. Like AJ said, everything's a psyop. I don't take that approach. That's nihilism to me. But I do wonder where you guys draw the line as how far do you participate or convince yourself that you're participating at the national, like following things, and it's just all overwhelming to me.
Yeah, I think that the country's gone whether or not Trump gets in. I do still appreciate Trump. I see him as he speaks the truth as he sees it, and there's stuff that he's done and been about that I wouldn't do, but I see him as basically a New York liberal boomer who loves America, and he's generally pro-Christian, and I think he is a Christian. So I appreciate him, and he's a man. He's just a man among boys in terms of the politicians, because they're just such a bunch of phonies. And he's like, you compared MLK to Malcolm X. I see his as a man who speaks from the heart, whereas these other guys are phonies. But I don't care. I don't keep up with his rallies necessarily. When I hear a clip of him, it's nice and refreshing generally, because he's just saying things as he sees them. He thinks outside the box in a lot of ways, which is cool. But I think that the country's pretty much gone unless a miracle from God happens and a lot more of us wake up, I suppose. I can't predict the future, but I cover this stuff because it's in the news and I have a podcast, and my job is Hake News.
I wonder, because it's like I'll comment on things at the world level or at the nation level. I'm just wondering about like active participation. Like a light on says that's not truth or dude, it's a fact. I was referring to like voting, like the take of like is it a totally illusory, completely? How do you verify it? Is it actually pragmatic to get everyone to say this is talk about psyops, by the way. Like, what if it was more destructive for all of humans to completely lose their sense of faith in government altogether? You know what I mean? Like overnight, like all gone. Like, what would be better? Them believing that they were participating in something at the national level when really they kind of knew in the background locals where it's at, right? And how they are, how do they live, how they affect people one-to-one, right? But I actually do wonder, like just from a pragmatic position, like would it be better if everyone, quote, woke up and the veil was lifted and nobody had any even false confidence in governmental systems, in the justice system? I think that might be, in the short term, kind of like a really chaotic moment. I think that could spur a lot of disaster, actually, if even you got people thinking that. So I do wonder from that perspective. Now, I honestly, you value the truth, so you want to know the truth. But sometimes it's like, it's not always the case that your kid should know the truth of the matter of a horrid existence, right? So there's concealment of the truth in order to protect. And I actually think about this quite a lot, where we don't understand what it's like to be in the most messed up power position where you have so much influence and power. Not even your friend could understand how someone could be in such a position. It's not like you have an obligation to tell every peon and peasant the truth of the matter. And I actually wonder if that's a good thing or not. Because my impulse is to say it's probably not. It's probably not a good thing for everyone to know every little thing going on. What's your guys' take?
Well, the way that I see it is, like, I'm all about reformation more so than revolution. Because revolution, the kind of abrupt overthrow of power, does create a vacuum, and that does create a lot of bloodshed. One might argue, well, Chad, no, you're wrong, because we won our independence as a country from England, and shortly thereafter we were able to come together and, by way of consensus, agree to a constitution and produce the greatest country the world has ever known. To that I say, well, the circumstances were a bit different insofar that the power in question was removed, was completely separated from the United States of America by a whole sea. And so there's just circumstances that are different in terms of who the founding fathers were, what they believed, the fact that they were well studied, and they thought a lot, long and hard about world governments and how world empires and how they have risen and fallen. And so they put a great deal of time and effort into suddenly deciding, okay, we should now fight for our independence. I don't know that there's anything like that exists here and now. Infrastructurally, I think it's not like you can't even pull a revolution off. And so the best you can do is from one-to-one, educate people and make them aware of the fact that, well, really your vote doesn't actually matter at the federal level, because the fate is already sealed in terms of the fact that the real power holders have both Republican and Democrat politicians in their back pocket. And so I think really, to the extent that we go and vote, it's merely to placate us, the people, to make us think that we have choice, that, you know, but choice is an illusion as far as federal politics is concerned when it comes right down to it. I think most of us are pretty credulous and ready to believe anything as it's delivered to us, either through the public school system or through the media, right or left. And so really, I don't know. I feel like I'm saying a lot. And I'm
well, Chad, the question is, if that's true, which I tend to kind of believe that, like that's placation, that you're playing a game in a sense. The question is, if that's true, because we brought up voting before. It's like, right. Let's say voting's false altogether, like then arguing should women or everybody get to vote is moot anyway. But I'm saying if everyone, let's say that's false, the new question is, should everyone know the truth about political matters? Because, Chad, I think we might share this view, is that what's more important from our worldview is that people know the truth, because the truth is a person, right? And the truth is a being. There's a way to live that's parallel but also independent from our political systems. It's not totally separate, right? They're joined in some form, but that the most important thing is to get the material truth out, the informative truth out. Infowars, right? It's like spiritual wars, no. Culture wars, no. Spiritual wars, no. Infowars. It's like this back and forth, and that's kind of what I'm asking. It's like, is it always useful or the right thing to do to get everybody who you already believe shouldn't have the vote anyway? Right? Wouldn't it be better if you thought, if not everyone deserved the right to vote, would it be a terrible thing if they thought they had a vote and they actually didn't anyway? Isn't that, I mean, from my view, I'd be a hypocrite to say, I don't think everyone should vote, and then be like, your vote doesn't matter, we got to change this. It's like, I don't have that impulse at all. Point. You know what I mean? So, Hake, what do you think about that?
I think that doesn't knowledge increase misery and sorrow? I think that sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it's good to know about stuff that you need to know about, so that you can prepare for it. But a lot of this stuff we can't change anyway. Chad made a great point that peace is almost always, or generally anyway, better than war. I loved when Trump said that he would have tried to negotiate, or he would have negotiated around the Civil War so that we didn't have it. That would have been nice probably nice not to kill 600,000 men. But yeah, I agree that all of this chaos, look at how they know that they're not going to enforce the law, so it's chaos.
Right.
The
Looting.
criminals are running the show here. So it is kind of better for people not to know or care about that stuff, and push morality. They say that you can't control a moral people. You have to demoralize them. You have to intimidate them. You have to appeal to their emotions, intimidation, fear, lust, whatever, to control them. So
right, and showing them, if suddenly the curtain of the Wizard of Oz was, Toto pulls it open and you see, and the guy's like all green. He's like, there is no voting. Isn't that more demoralizing than liberating in the moment? Like, what do you do from there anyway? I'm a peasant still, right? I'm a peasant class. So it's like, if that veil was lifted and it was like declared, I wouldn't worry about myself, but I would worry about people. It's like the argument of like, I don't believe in aliens, but if there were, wouldn't it be pragmatic to not let people know, because it could cause absolute havoc? Like there's actually an ethical tension there, and that's kind of what I'm asking. AJ, what's your stance on that?
So much of this is hard to prove. It's like, people, I mean, I doubt that Joe Biden from his basement won the 2020
with 80 million.
Absolutely
yeah,
right. I do.
All.
But it's like, am I willing to have Jim Bob host a moderated debate between me and somebody else on that reality? No, like I don't know that. I don't know. I don't think so much of this is somewhat we derive from our intuitions. but in common sense. But at the end of the day, how do you prove any of this stuff? What I think it's also interesting, James, how you mentioned the Civil War. Everybody talks about how amazing the Civil War was and that it freed the slaves, and it was to that regard. But nobody talks about how the fact that the downside of the Civil War was that it gave rise to. I mean, that was the very linchpin between the. It's often said that the Civil War was actually fought over Jefferson's view of the Constitution versus Lincoln's view of the Constitution. Lincoln,
Thomas Jefferson versus Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. And so this whole idea of federalism and Lincoln's foremost concern was preserving the Union, and because of the Civil War, it really took this idea of individual states' rights and states' ability to govern themselves away, and gave unbridled power to the federal government. So as amazing as it was to free and really end the greatest tragedy in human rights violations of American history in the enslavement of African American people, but the downside to it was it really gave unbelievable power to the federal government, and whereas the states created the federal government to.
We didn't need a civil war to end slavery, though.
What's that, Chad? Say that again.
we didn't need a civil war to end slavery.
Sure, and so that's the thing about it. People forget that every single civilized country in the entire world ended slavery peaceably, except here, and we have perhaps the worst racial animosity towards ethnic groups out of any other. Not to mention the blood of over 500,000 people to do so. And so what I like to focus on, especially being in the fight for life, is really what I can control is local government. Like,
that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I mean, from a libertarian position, they think this is like, oh, how could you ask? So, well, I mean, they would say, well, if it's consensual, then it's not. But it's like, it's kind of like a funny question to ask. Sorry to interrupt. Logan Daly, $5. Blasphemy against the great crusade against servitude. Y'all gonna anger the Church of Liberalism with this one. I actually have a question from the history buffs here. Is it omitting a lot to even say the Civil War was just about slavery, or is it about power structures with slavery as the marquee on the movies, on the movies thing? They're like, and this power structure, it's featuring slavery, as opposed to like there was some big thing and the focus was slavery or not slavery. It seemed to be, no, that was a subtitle of the overall thing that was about government power, relations to states, different territories. We're gonna run this shit how we want to, not you over there. It wasn't like, how could you with the black people? It wasn't like, maybe for some people, but I feel like there was more to that, and I feel like it's sold in history in some revisionist sense that it was only about that. And just like Chad from his studies, the civil rights movement wasn't just about, it's in the same way, right? It wasn't just about,
it was all theatrics.
Yeah. So that's going on all the time, and and we're all prone and vulnerable to good storytelling. So it's just again, I think it's lost. I think it might be lost in the blurry winds of history.
The Civil War was about far more than slavery. I mean, the fact of the matter is, industrialization was happening. I mean, slavery was being rendered obsolete. Again, it was about when I look at somebody like Robert E. Lee, who I studied pretty extensively, it wasn't as if these Confederate higher ups just insisted on keeping their slaves because they hated Negroes so much. This is a false narrative that we're taught in public schools that is at odds with reality. Am I advocating for quote unquote white supremacy and all this other nonsense? No. But I think history is a lot more complex than, which I think is the point that you're kind of making, Jim Bob. I think history is a lot more complex than what we're told. And a lot of this is due to Marxist propaganda over the course of the 20th century to cause everybody to think of America in terms of race, in terms of the haves and the have-nots, who has power, who doesn't have power. And they take so much of the truth, twist it to present a narrative that you can't refute because you didn't live back then. So, I mean, who has time to like sit around and read books all day to understand, or to look at slave narratives, which I have done, to look at, what was life really like on these plantations, which I have done. Like, who has time to really do all that to kind of get a better, more clearer picture of the past? Very few of us. And so it's easier to just kind of go with the run of the mill narrative and believe that America has always been so racist against blacks and other so-called people of color. And Martin Luther King came and saved the day, but we're still trying to figure it out. So this is just a very lazy narrative that so many of us fall for.
Tech isn't going to help. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some, slaves who lived through it and they're just like AI, like really well done, survivors of slavery or the Holocaust. They'll start popping up AI accounts and everyone, whoa, wow, we never heard of this one. The tech actually further blurs the line, and I actually wonder to what extent history itself will start to I wouldn't say customize, because that's already happening, right? That's what we're arguing against, but not privatize. I don't know the word. It's more like it splinters, so you have to actually actively seek little groups that provide their own account of history, and that obviously exists already, but I'm wondering if there's like going to be eventually a market for it, where that enters a market where you actually have to search out the correct narrative, right? Because I think the controllers, the technocrats, love this. They love that history is blurred, and then they could rewrite history and put it on a ledger that you can't disagree with. Like the ledger, the blockchain history secures history as it's written forever in stone, so to speak. And if you go against that, it's basically heresy. That's the kind of future I see with history. That's why I'm wondering, to what extent do we value history now if we know we're interacting with something that could be completely revised, right? Mm-hmm. I actually wonder what the answer to that question is. And if the answer is yes, we still value history, okay, what's the methodology now, given that we clearly watch in real time revisionist history of a week of something happening? Not just like century, a week, and people fall for it. Yeah, same day, revisionist. So revisionist news would be a fun outlet to just create as a parody, but
nobody wants to mention, in reference to this. Obviously, the benefit of the modern context milieu that we live in is the fact that it's the information age, and we can actually read firsthand accounts. We have at your fingertips, we can actually read all this stuff. But the thing that nobody wants to talk about is just the old saying, follow the money. So, so when you're talking about things like the Civil War, nobody wants to mention the fact that a part of this dynamic that went into this was the monetary aspect of this, right? So you had slavery in both the North and the South, and you had a lot of people making money off of slavery in the North and the South. However, the thing that people don't realize is over 95% of the nation's GDP at the time came from the exports of America. And what were those exports? Cotton and tobacco. Cotton and tobacco were the largest exports of the nation, and that was only grown primarily in the South. And so the North had no problem with slavery as long as they could benefit from it monetarily, right, off of tariffs. And it wasn't until the tariffs got super high and the South said, what the heck, dude, we're just going to govern ourselves, that Lincoln attacked Fort Sumter and the whole thing. Now people are going to automatically say, oh, well, you're just making this case that slavery was really about money and not about slavery. No, I'm saying it's multifactorial. I'm saying that there's always a narrative behind the narrative. There's always other factors that play. Just like, I mean, take for instance, this last war of terror that we engaged in. The history books will write that we invaded Iraq. Why? For weapons of mass destruction, right? That's what is probably going to be written in the history books and told to our children. But we all know that was utter bullshit. And that was the pretext for which in 9/11, regardless of what you think about that whole.
Yeah.
Right,
we have to tread lightly on YouTube, but
sorry.
Certainly.
The whole 9 event. Sorry.
Yeah. Blame it on Tim Osman. No, you're right. The multifaceted aspect of history influences basically, Chad, your approach to this is dead on. By the way, you should link up with Rachel Wilson, who has a book on the starts of the occult starts of feminism, but also standpoint theory, which you're probably much aware of already. How revisionist history and standpoint theory go hand in hand as far as using a Marxist lens to sort of cultivate activists in school. Like, I mean, kids are now activists at like fifth grade, right? If you don't have them in some sort of classical or private school, even then, they're going to learn from their friends that they're an advocate for, oh, you're an activist at at fifth grade. And it's not an accident. This is like directly. So the question is not even how important proper history is, because that's a correction that could or couldn't be made, but really how you utilize a narrative of history as a weapon is almost more crucial and more apparent and more pressing than what's true about the history even. And it's like sad to say it because you want to get to the truth of the matter, but the more pressing issue is you use history to rewrite a story that states there's always an oppressor and always a victim, right? Who is it now? You get to invent it on the fly, right? And this is very effective for kids too, who are, who might gravitate toward people who tell them, you have to look out for what's unfair, right? Well, if you give them the lens for what's unfair through a lens that says there's always have and have-nots. Yeah, if you're black, you're always going to be a leg down, by the way. Well, imagine how disgusting that is for a parent to tell a child, right? By the way, you're already limited. What? What do you mean? Well, it's hard to understand and prove, but you're limited because your skin color. You'll see. That affects a child, and that's all from a certain theory. That's all from a lens. It's not just you ask any average black person in America whether they think systemic racism exists, and they say yes, kind of general. And then you ask them to point where, and they can't in their own lives, and they can't point. Right. So at the this like macro lens, they assume it. And at the micro individual lens, they can't justify it in their own experience. So it's just like this boogeyman ghost. But anyway, it's related to history in general. I think it applies to cosmology. I think it applies to the evolutionary theory. I mean, we can go into different rabbit holes with this, but the point is, if you tell a story to someone, it will influence the way they participate in life. We as fathers especially have an obligation to guide children and guide them away from false narratives. Now, that might be more recent history, or it might be long-standing history that's assumed about the human species. So, base theory says all of this straw man, none of this is happening outside Jim Bob's. You didn't mention anything. You didn't mention not one example. You've said nothing. Go ahead.
You guys are right. Google, Facebook, the government, the teachers, the liberal media, they censor and omit true alternative facts. And you can hardly find the stuff that Chad O. Jackson has sought out on his own. Because if you're just a peruser, of stuff, Chad Jackson mentioned Marxism and Marxist propaganda around the slavery narrative. I heard that Karl Marx was cheering on the Civil War because he wanted to end not only slavery, but wage labor and all those things. And he even wrote a letter, I heard, to Abe Lincoln.
Yeah.
Him and his boils. That was him with the boils, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's it. These people reject that like things like standpoint theory exist, that these aren't even these are clear and documented precedents to critical race theory. Like, it's not an accident that they've fine-tuned the filtering process and the labels to fit an exact social version of Marxism, like a social version of it. It's beyond conspiratorial. It's just it's applied. It's actually actively applied at college. You can actually go and learn the class, right? So it's not like this is outside of the realm of tinfoil hat at this point. It's too historically documented, the trajectory of these theories and stuff. So
I'm almost a Gen Xer. So I grew up in I'm like old millennial, young Gen X. And I grew up thinking the North were the good guys, the South were the bad guys. And the MLKs, I only knew one MLK quote, judging people by the content of the character, not the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Who wouldn't do that? Like, why would anybody do that? But I'm like, that's as much of a slap in the face as telling white people that Black Lives Matter. Hey, white people, Black Lives Matter. That's it's this oppressor oppressed, good guys, bad guys, when actually everybody's evil. So much in these things, it's evil versus evil. Mm-hmm. And some people are right about some topics, but they're still evil at heart. And it's two devils fighting over ego, really.
Mm-hmm. Right. Agreed.
What a mess.
What a mess. Any other?
If you're gonna talk about slavery too, it's like, why are we so, and rightfully so, like totally upset about the conditions of people in the antebellum South, but then not realizing, like, talking about the fact that we're locking people up in tiny cages, over representative Black people in America being locked up in tiny cages at the expense of the taxpayer, instead of some type of system whereby like you can actually repay your debt back. So
they should have thought about that before they committed the crime, though.
True.
Well, but what I'm saying is
put them to work.
Well, but see, that's the thing. It's like I'm personally, it's weird because, and this is my, I guess my Christian aspect of things is, like, how do we think about the standard of justice in our justice system? I've been arrested several times for pro-life activism. I'm facing just bullshit felonies as we speak. A very corrupt system. And I can see how the system is so broken. Pro-life people are being locked up at the hands of a very totalitarian state right now for engaging in civil disobedience, completely nonviolent thing. The old grandmas are facing 11 years in prison right now for engaging in a peaceful, nonviolent blockade of abortion clinics. So it really begs the question. It's like, what is the standard by which we can judge if these things are just or unjust? And I'm saying, like, this whole system where, like, if I steal $100,000 from you, you lock me up in a little cage for 10 years. And then 1 year in a prison, they've done studies, is like more than a year in Harvard. So I'm being stolen from on the forefront, and then I'm being stolen from on the back end, because I have to
taxpayer
pay for all of the housing of these people, instead of a system that would actually pay back the people that I've wronged. And people are coming out of prison way more worse criminals than they were in the first place. I just think the entire system needs to, we need to, if the crime is, you have the burden of proof that is so overwhelming, that is serious enough. If you raped somebody or if you killed somebody, you get the death penalty upon a huge burden of proof. Or we have a system that actually provides for restitution and and a type of regeneration of these people into society to pay back the debts that they've owned, instead of just locking them up to do nothing. And this is perpetuating the system of injustice and the system of
I have a partial solution to this, AJ, and it might sound kind of funny, but I actually think that prison should be kind of turned into not full death coliseums, but performative competition arenas that people pay to watch. I mean, I'm dead serious that I think instead of going to the NBA and watching BLM on everybody's shirt, you go to the prison. They perform in a variety of things, right? And so you basically fund it, and they're not doing nothing. I mean, I'd rather. That's a good question, though. Right? Pretty much, yeah. So I'm like, why wouldn't you utilize it the way it is and not just have it a stagnant system that doesn't produce anything? It should produce something if you're going to have it. But the larger problem, I think we all agree, is that there's some problem with privatized system where people can then pay judges and people look away, and you're basically looking at corrupt. You're basically looking at a hotel prison, right? You want to fill the rooms just like a hospital or a hotel. But the other problem is we've been discussing this whole time. In an immoral society that's degenerate, and it necessitates more laws that fill more prisons, the race isn't necessarily, I guess in the short term, AJ, would be how do you mitigate the unworkability of a prison system, but it's never as much of a crucial race, and this isn't really I doubt anyone's going to contend with this, that the moral problem of just behavior itself will, if you have a fallen society where they don't even think sin is real, they don't even think degeneracy is a thing, how could we be surprised with the increase of prison? Even like, forget the wrongful accusations and convictions, right? Just like basic things like degeneracy, drug dealing, prostitution, all of the more social things, right? I'm not against imprisoning people for indecency, but the problem is, AJ, if we do take that approach, we're gonna still have a problem with the overpopulation of prisons. So it needs a multi-pronged attack if we're really looking for a solution to this issue.
Well, we should stop
like generational.
We should stop subsidizing defund single mothers. There's a whole lot of stuff that we could do that would help with this issue. Mm-hmm. I think that we have a homeless problem over in LA where I'm living, and all up and down the West Coast, and I guess the big cities around the country. I don't think that should be allowed. I think they should be made to work. We could bring back the chain gangs, but I mean, this is just all fantasy, honestly, because it's never gonna
in LA especially. I mean,
right.
Wow. I mean, they're like, AJ, can we give them more drugs? They're like, should we give them more drugs?
Yeah, give them needles.
Yeah.
AJ, so what you bring up, I find very interesting. With all due respect, because you bring up what you are being charged for, and I agree. I agree with you that is unjust, and this that in my opinion, I would put into the category of a political witch hunt. Whereas when it comes to a lot of the crimes that these, I hate to say it, but blacks are in prison for, these are seriously heinous crimes, seriously heinous crimes.
But not all of them.
Not all of them, but a pretty good number of them are. And so with that being the case, it's like we can go through a case by case kind of thing of determining what is heinous versus what isn't. But I don't think the conclusion is, with all due respect, I don't think that the wisest conclusion is what you lay out, because I see the same arguments being made by Ivy League liberal or leftist professors who believe in abolishing prisons altogether. Now, that's not what you're arguing, but to me, and maybe this begs a deeper conversation on a later day, but to me, like what you're saying, with all due respect, sounds eerily similar to some of the same arguments that I see coming out of that kind of.
No, I grant that.
Real quick, you bring up, from a Christian perspective, and I too am a Christian, but for me, what then would you argue I guess you did kind of give your conclusion as to what the way to fix it. But like, what does the Bible say, or specifically the Mosaic Law say about the proper way to punish these different kind of crimes committed? Would you be more in favor of, I guess, an Old Testament kind of way of going about punishing various crimes, depending on what those crimes are?
Great question. Yeah. So I think my kind of political civil view of this is that we take the general principles, and oddly enough, our system that we have already in place already recognizes this. So common law, as everybody understands it, was literally stemmed from King Alfred. King Alfred in England literally looked at the book of Deuteronomy, and he said, okay, what does a just society in modern day England look like if we were to take the general equity of these principles and apply them in a modern context? And from that came common law. From that birthed unbelievable amounts of liberty, and the Magna Carta and Western civilization, the Western legal system. I mean, an example of this is even due process, right? So like under the civil law, you couldn't convict somebody unless you had 2 or 3 independent eyewitnesses to the event that occurred. And so this whole idea of innocent till proven guilty, the whole idea of due process, everything sprung from this divinely inspired law given to Moses for Israel back in that day. So what would that look like in this? So I have an objective basis to say that locking image bearers of God up in a tiny cage, demoralizing them, is unjust, right? Especially for an extended period of time. However, so if you have enough of a burden of proof and the crime is heinous enough, then obviously there's capital punishment that's in view. If you've killed somebody, if you've raped somebody, the due process standard of convicting them is unbelievably high. However, stealing, other types of crimes, restitution is made. Never in the biblical law do you ever see this system of locking people up in a tiny cage in order to punish them, as if that somehow made them more moral or fix society, or actually put them in back communion with the person that they have offended. So I would say if you've defrauded somebody, that you need to repay them. And if you've done such a heinous crime that actually it's a life for life, this.
I actually agree with the principle here. I actually argued, it sounds kind of crazy, but I argued that if you were to, if you're going to look at like capital punishment or something like a death penalty, I wonder if the person who's been wronged, the family member, right? They have to do it if they believe that.
Yeah.
They have to do it, and they get the choice to forgive too. So they have 2 choices. Yeah. And guess what? Obviously, forgiveness. I actually think in that system, forgiveness will win most of the time, because people know in their moral hearts that they can't actually live with the weight of taking a life. They actually know, and that forgiveness is actually what could fundamentally change a person. This is absent that they're completely gone, like psychopathic or whatever. Base Theory asked, how does slavery relate to survival of the fittest? Because he said before, he's an atheist, and he said, there's Christians in the chat arguing for mortal combat and slavery or whatever. I don't even know if that's true. But from your view, there could be nothing wrong. How does it relate to survival of the fittest? That's easy. I'm fitter than someone. I take them by force, make them do things for nothing in exchange, or maybe some peanuts or mashed potatoes. How is that inconsistent with survival of the fittest, right? So the strongest wins, right? That's the animal kingdom, right? If a lion figured out that he could enslave a zebra, you think he would do it based on pure animal instincts? Of course. This is why atheism is so stupid, is because you guys come up with all of these, the Christian Bible. Did you see what's in the Bible? Do you know what's in nature?
Yeah.
Do you know what's in nature? That's all you have. Nature.
Well,
You have
and
nothing.
by the way, like when a lot of atheists and non-believers poke fun at the slavery that exists in the Bible, they anachronistically attribute the type of slavery that was advocated for to be the type of slavery that existed in the antebellum South, which was which is not. This was like man stealing. Man stealing was a capital crime in the Old Testament civil law. But the point of the matter is that the type of slavery that was talked about was you had to pay off the debt.
Indentured servitude.
Yeah.
7 years. Year of Jubilee, right?
Which is
And
prison. Which is
Judaism.
prison, right? That's what
Right?
prison is right now, basically.
Exactly. Only you're not housed
for that
by the
part.
person and
Yeah.
fed and
Right.
to $80,000 to $100,000 a year to house and somebody sitting in a cage and do nothing.
Right.
You actually had to work off your debt to the person that you owed that debt to, and then we in the academy. So how I would differ from Chad to answer your question from these Marxist ideologues in the academy that are they define
And in the chat.
right who define what is this restorative justice. Restorative justice for them means nothing happens to these people.
Right.
Restorative justice means you get to wrong society and never face the consequences of it. What I'm actually advocating for is no, if you wrong somebody, you repay them. And if it's heinous enough that you can't repay them, upon all due process and the overwhelming burden of proof, which is much higher than the standard that we have today, you are killed, right? You are judged by a jury of your peers, and the overwhelming evidence of those who witnessed this crime against you raping. And I mean, and it's just so hypocritical, right? Because these very people are like the same people that are trying to frame pedophiles as minor attracted people and just completely eliminate
Soften it. Yeah. Soften it. Yeah.
And so I'm actually I think there's a seed of truth in there, but those that truth must be judged against the objective standard of what real justice looks like, and it's not up to everybody's own interpretation of what that is.
Base Theory says, and I was saying that you specifically, Jim Bob and Hake, were the ones advocated for slavery. Hake wants to force homeless to work, Mortal Kombat. Yeah, why not? What's wrong with it? Tell me from your view what's wrong with using force to remove people who are drug addicts, rehabilitate them through work, labor.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it? You tell me what's wrong with it from your view, from your atheist view, please.
That will help their mental health, honestly.
Yeah,
a
it will
lot of
help
them are
them.
mentally ill. A lot of them are on drugs. And there's nothing more good feeling other than Christianity for a man. Well, probably even better than the so-called Christianity.
How is it different?
Yeah,
how is it different based if there's a person who's mentally unstable out in the street? You use force to physically remove them, put them in a place against their will, and forcefully try to rehabilitate. How is it different? How is it different? You don't have an answer, and none of you could ever answer this problem because it literally demolishes your counter. Okay.
I was literally in jail last week. Okay. And I don't know if you guys know you guys ever heard of the pro-life Spider-Man? He climbs buildings without ropes or anything he climbs these skyscrapers, and then he uses the publicity to raise money for pregnant women, right? So women in crisis. So last week he climbed the Las Vegas Sphere, and he raised money to get a homeless woman off of the streets who is pregnant, to provide everything she needs in order to keep her baby, because she wanted to actually keep her baby and not pay an assassin to dismember them limb from limb. Mm-hmm. The point is, I literally went and filmed my friend on a public sidewalk with everybody who is there observing him climb. And I did this with my cell phone, and both me and my wife were violently assaulted by police, put in handcuffs, and charged with 2 felonies as co-conspirators somehow to climb his building and do the thing that he did. Now I have to fight 2 felony convictions and 3 misdemeanors for literally filming on a public street with my cell phone doing this.
Right.
And so it's like the other side, you know, we as conservatives, or I don't know how I would loosely call myself a conservative, but how we talk past each other is the other side is saying, no, like, look, there is something to this system that is innately broken, that is totally messed up and is completely unjust. And we talk past each other because we see people lawless in the streets. We see Gavin Newsom, San Francisco. You can steal $900 worth of goods and services and not even get charged. And we say, okay, we need to lock all these people up. And then the other side of the coin is actually, no, they have a seed of truth in what they're saying, is because a lot of these people are totally being jailed for totally bullshit stuff by a tyrannical government that has no burden of proof for the stuff that they're accusing of. And they were literally, my cell phone was taken, all of my stuff off my body was taken, and I don't get that back. I had to pay $1,500 worth of to get a new cell phone for my wife and I. My wife wasn't even, she was sitting there right next to me, violently assaulted by police, locked up, and she's facing the 2 felonies that I am for literally standing in public.
Did you know going into this that was the the level of attack on the pro-lifers?
No clue. I mean,
now that you know it, are you going to continue this type of thing?
For what? Standing in public? I mean, how do I get away with this?
No, I'm just saying, are you going to continue the type of pro-life activism, knowing that they're going to continue violating your rights? You can become a martyr, and are you willing to accept that?
Absolutely. I mean, the question is, are we in a Holocaust? And and I use that term intentionally. This is the intentional destruction of over 3,000 children every single day in this country that are literally being torn. So I don't know if you guys know about me and my work, but I was one of 4 activists that uncovered a box of 3rd trimester children outside of an abortion clinic in Washington, D.C. A medical waste driver went into the abortion clinic, came back out, and was unloading boxes. 2 of my friends said, do you know what's in those boxes? This driver says, I go to surgical clinics. I don't know, probably liposuction. I don't know. And they're like, no, that's an abortion clinic. Those are the remains of the children of this community. This dude is just freaking shocked. They used the opportunity to then appeal to this guy and say, hey, can we give these children a proper burial? He's like, what, you want me to give you a box? And
oh, it's boring. Hold on, sorry to interrupt you. Base theory, it's boring to see the consequences of your shit view. Yeah. Babies in baskets. Yeah. Oh, it's boring. No, that's called you disassociating from your own worldview.
I want to address base theory and AJ's, honestly, because AJ's making a point that this abortion is a Holocaust, and it is. It's 60 million and counting.
Almost 70. Yeah.
Yeah. You said that slavery is the greatest human rights. I'm not sure if I agree with human rights violation in America. This thing is, I think abortion is far worse than slavery.
And you care about Black Death? There's almost 1,500 Black children every single day are being lynched in the womb.
Yeah, I grew up, I'm a little bit older of a millennial, so I was taught that there were good and bad slave owners who some treated their slaves justly, some unjustly. So slavery is not necessarily inherently this unjust thing. And based theory, or whatever his name is, said, I oppose slavery morally because of my empathy. Empathy is just a liberal word, is going into your imagination, thinking that you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes.
And it's off, and it's scientifically off, by the way. They keep using this term empathy. Empathy, if you actually study some of it, it's often a projection. Can it be useful in dictating and deciding what's going on? But no, it can't be fully accurate. By the way, if empathy was the basis for morality, if I walk down the path and I look down the alley and see someone getting assaulted, as long as I feel what they might be feeling, I've done my moral duty. Doesn't tell you what you ought to do, right? It doesn't tell you anything. By the way, Based, you still didn't. You avoided the question. A person who's nutso on the street gets picked up by authorities by force, placed into a home, rehabilitation center. Is that slavery? They're forced. It's against their will. They're forced to eat what's there. They're forced to do the the mental programs to try to rehabilitate them, right? Is that okay? And how is it not slavery, right? How is it not? You can't answer this question. And so, that's why I always, especially the atheists, they're always appealing to the Bible and their incredulity of the things that were happening in the Bible. Oh, big whoop. By the way, let's say there was a neighboring country. I don't know. You have this in recent history that you like to appeal to a bunch with a little mustache man. Let's say there's a neighboring country whose habitual and weekly habits, including lighting babies on fire, right? Let's say that was the case in a neighboring country. Would the atheists stand next to me in invading that country to stop this from happening, right? Why not? Why not? Right? Because if you're going to take a biblical analysis, you have to include the context of what's going on at the time. By the way, finding a woman in the wilderness, right? What's better off for her, base theory? You capture her and basically rehabilitate her as quote, property, or let her in the woods. Just leave her there. She can always start an OnlyFans from a treehouse. Get the fuck out of here. Sorry, my language, but Jesus.
But I mean, it just underscores and to finish the story, this guy let pro-life activists have a box to actually give these children a proper burial. We opened the box and there's 115 babies inside. 5 of them are almost full term, 3rd trimester children.
Oh, wow.
More than that, they have evidence of federal crimes, partial birth abortion. One of them is in an undisturbed amniotic sac, begging the question, how in the world do you kill a child in its amniotic sac without having a partial birth abortion? It's literally impossible.
It's wild.
And we turn these children over to the DC PD. A lot of people just doubt that 3rd trimester abortion even happens in this country. The only box in the last 20 years that has been opened happens to have 5 3rd trimester children in it. I took photos and videos of these babies holding in my own very hands. Shocked the world. But this is the system in which we live in. And talk about systemic injustice. Give me a freaking break. As a respiratory therapist, who spent a career at UCLA putting little babies on ventilators, each and every single one of these children, these 5 that we turned over, could have lived outside of the womb, some of which little to no help at all. Full term.
Do you ever get tempted to feel?
You asked me the question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Will you stop doing this? Hell no, I will not stop doing this.
Do you get bitter at what you're going through and what you're seeing? And like bitter and hateful?
Of course. I mean, it's like who can hold a full-term child in your arms and not be violently angry, vehemently angry at the person who did that, and more so the system that lets that happen. And so, no, I will not stop, and I will not freaking be silenced. And,
Nitty, another resident atheist says, have those videos been posted? Where? I'd like to see them. I think he's getting,
you can go to my Instagram. There's, if you want to DM me, I can send you all the videos, but you can also go to, just type in Justice for the 5 or go to j45.com. There's some, a group of girls that are among the 4 people that unbox these children, and behind this, they have a whole website devoted to it. They're leftist atheists who are vegan and happen to be pro-life through their veganism. I don't ascribe to their political ideology, but they have the whole thing. We're working on a congressional hearing about the matter. Chip Roy and a number of members of Congress are trying to actually get an autopsy and justice for these children, because it turns out that abortion is so deregulated and protected by the system that even when you you give the evidence and turn over full-term children, one of the babies had the back of her skull snipped in just a classic partial birth abortion technique. And you deliver these over to the authorities, and they refuse to investigate Mayor Bowser and the DCPD had a press conference and said these babies were all legally aborted in DC according to DC law.
Out of sight, out of mind. La la
Yeah.
la.
Yeah, la 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 la. Yeah. The
Yeah.
other part, AJ, I'm sure you're aware of this, but there are certain companies that that seek out parts or certain cells.
Yep.
In those
David
processes
Blyden
and
is a
those,
friend of mine.
you know, and
Yeah.
that's fully marketed. That's an open and black market, both at the same time. There's incentives for this practice. It's not just, well, I don't kid. It's not, no, there's more going. It's just, you know, partly because it's so shocking that it's, you know, the news loves shocking things if it's like a war or explosion, but for some reason they can't really tell the truth of the matter in visual form for those kind of things. And I'm torn with that too, because like, do you just like, you know, AJ, if you had it your way, would you if there was like a billboard company, do you think we ought put that kind of stuff up publicly? I mean, because I always have this decency thing with kids too. Like, should kids see that as a reality, and when? Because it's like, you know what I mean? Like, when should kids see the truth of that matter, and to what extent the truth of that matter? That's my question.
It's so hypocritical, even not that this is obviously coming from good faith from you, but the question is even hypocritical to those who would use this as an argument against it, because this is what we're doing to children. And you're concerned about how children are going to view this when we're actually doing this to the class of children that are being totally eliminated and having the arms and legs and skulls totally ripped apart from them.
True. Let me push back on that, because let's say we retain some footage from Epstein Island of like torture. I mean, that's something that happens that nobody knows about. But should I show my children that, and when is it different?
The distinction is it's legal. Right.
Legal,
this isn't like Epstein Island. This is something sanctioned and funded by you, the taxpayer.
And so yet we want to be all brave and moral and condemn slavery and the 70 years ago World War II stuff. Like, we're so much better. Give me a break.
Well, and if we want to talk about this in terms of the historical movements behind this, when besides the fact that this example I'm about to bring up, if you turn on the TV and see the war in Ukraine, you're going to see, or at Gaza or anything, you're going to see victim image after victim image trying to pull at your heartstrings to get you to see the reality of what's going on in X country, to which they're asking you to funnel billions of dollars into. But the poignant part of history that I'd like to bring up is, and Chad can maybe speak to this, is what moved Rosa Parks to not give up her seat was the fact that she couldn't get out of her head the image of Emmett Till. So Emmett Till was this child who was in the Deep South and catcalled a young girl, and he was a black boy that had been so brutally beaten by this young white girl's relatives that his face was utterly unrecognizable. And the mother of Emmett Till said, I am going to have an open casket so that the whole world could see the image of what racism is. She took the casket and opened it up to see the image, and the image of Emmett Till went everywhere and really sparked the impetus of a lot of the social revolution of the 60s. But Rosa Parks said that she saw the image of that boy, and it was so powerful that she couldn't give up her seat. And I think we need to open the casket on abortion and let people see what in the hell they are championing as women's choice, when 50% of the women are being brutally either poisoned or dismembered in the womb. You can tell I'm passionate about this, because I'll tell you what, when you hold the bodies of these murdered children, it changes you.
Yeah, I assume so. It's like, that's why I'm wondering, it's like, is that meant for certain people who can handle seeing that, but then there's also the necessity that people see it so they can become people who don't tolerate it. So it's kind of like this trade-off as far as gore, horror, and a call to action. So it's a weird line. I don't know the balance between that line, honestly. But I'm glad that you do that work, because that hiding it is a problem. Definitely, it's absolutely a problem, the way they smuggle all of that. Keep your eyes on other things, keep your eyes on all these other topics, and you're like, wait, do you know what this looks like?
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of that footage. I mean, I was in a debate in high school. I was pretty brutal right off the bat. I think it was like 9th or 10th grade. There was actually someone in my class, a very small class, who actually went through with this procedure, and there was a debate. And I took the pro-life approach, and I didn't know what a debate was. Because I didn't know what a debate was, what I did is I brought in the old school VCR that they roll in with the tube TV, and I just played a video of an abortion. And I won that debate, and I said nothing. Now it's brutal, right? It's brutal, and we have to kind of navigate decency versus spiritual warfare, but and I don't know there's a clear answer. We have to just use our discernment, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, there's a classic line from I believe it's Scott Klusendorf, which is a pro-life speaker. He says, when you show the images of abortion protests itself. So it's very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, it's just common sense. It's a life. Even if it's still an embryo, it's undeniably a life. But these people they don't care about what's right.
Chad, I know you probably agree with the position of AJ's passion and direction, but I saw you look in a different direction when he mentioned Rosa Parks. And considering you're a specialist in correcting history regarding black special people in history, is there anything you wanted to say regarding that? Or
yeah, Rosa Parks is a myth. She's a plant. The whole business of her having Emmett Till in her head, and that's what made her not want to get out of her seat. I mean, it makes for a really good story to cause people to get up and take to the streets, and cause high school students to skip class and go march in a protest or a demonstration that's not permitted, so as to get dogs and hoses sicked on them, so as to, in Martin Luther King's words, dramatize the whole civil rights movement. So it's a myth, but I take his point. His point being that, like, when you think of these images of the dismembered babies, when you think of the atrocity that is the abortion industry, that is enough in itself to keep pro-life activists doing what they're doing, even at the threat of being charged with felonies and this, that, and the third. That, I think, is a very noble and honorable call. But again, I think it's interesting to use the Rosa Parks thing, and I'm not trying to demean or bash him over the head about this, but it's interesting to use that because this is kind of how mythology works. To the extent that we're sold a narrative, that we're sold a mythology, we then rely upon those mythologies to make what we're doing and in the moment make sense. So so I get it, and it's just unfortunate that the civil rights movement and Rosa Parks and all these others are so heavily relied upon, regardless of where people stand on the political spectrum, in order to make sense of how we progress today. When the reality is the whole object of the civil rights movement, even the idea to keep the casket open for Emmett Till, that wasn't originally his mother's idea. She was advised by the same kind of people who surrounded themselves around MLK to do this because they understood publicity, what kind of publicity this would add to the civil rights movement, which again was a ploy to Trojan horse Marxism and to the American fabric. And so this poor woman was exploited by these same sinister Marxian type people. again,
And
I'm
shame
not
on her
trying to,
too.
yeah. I'm not trying to take away from the noble and good and worthwhile work that AJ is talking about. But it's just interesting once again how these myths are so ingrained in the American fabric.
Yeah.
Do you think with Chauvin it was originally his boot, and they were like, no, use the knee?
Chauvin the plant too. I know Helen Keller is a lie.
Oh, Helen Keller is the worst. It's the most embarrassing. To me, it's the most embarrassing. It's to me, and and I'm a tinfoil hat warrior. I don't believe we even went to the moon, but Helen Keller to me is even almost worse than that because it's just some of the footage. Oh, with the she's doing this in the friend's hand, and she says that women should write more. It's like what?
Do you have any Helen Keller memes?
What, Jake? Hake, what do you think of Helen Keller?
And I've never really looked into it, but I was amused.
I haven't looked into it either.
I was amused when I heard that Owen Benjamin Big Bear was calling her out as a liar, and I didn't know.
That's ironic.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yep. Go ahead.
But yeah, I on a serious note, I want to encourage AJ and all of us as Christians or whatever to keep your chin up, kings, and have a good attitude. Like God said, in the Bible, it says, be of good cheer, whatever you have to go through.
Right.
Don't get bitter at the injustices. Don't be dismayed. Don't be surprised at the evils of the world.
Right.
That's my only point about that.
That's a challenge. Is generating joyfulness. Right. It's our challenge. Yeah. But there is passionate, righteous anger also. Mm-hmm. Just we get to experience that, express that as well.
You have to keep your wits about you though, because you go overboard or you do something in passion, and it's not necessarily the Holy Spirit led, and you get yourself in more trouble than you need, or you look bad to the person who could be swayed by seeing you actually act in love and perfect peace within.
Yeah. We're reaching at 2:51 as far as the hour. I'm going to start wrapping it up. If there's any other super chats for my guests or myself, let me know. Crafty Mang, $5. Jim Bob, where can I find your Discord? I did post it in the chat. I'm interested in joining. Yeah, I posted in the chat. If anyone's listening out there who wants to get on the Discord, do you guys all do Discord? It's kind of a fun little platform. A lot of like organized group calls and chats. And a lot of these types of conversation, panel style, happen without the video necessarily, and it's a lot of fun. Some of it can be very time consuming, just to warn you, but it is quite fun if you guys don't have your own Discord.
Jim Bob, I have a question actually for Chad.
Sure.
Have you heard of Ida B. Wells? I was just curious about you've heard of her.
Yeah, the journalist.
Yeah, apparently she was a pro-life woman who refused to give up her seat before Rosa Parks did, but she was suppressed because of her pro-life and kind of more Republican leanings.
Oh, Rosa Parks V1 version 1. The story gets deeper.
Well, there was another one who got pregnant out of wedlock, right?
Yeah,
and then
she was a teenager who got pregnant, and originally E.D. Nixon wanted to use the pregnant teenager as the face of the movement, but he understood that church-going Negroes in the South are not going to sacrifice their jobs on behalf of a girl that got knocked up out of wedlock. And so this is why they decided to use Rosa Parks, who was a treasurer for the local NAACP. Go figure. She wasn't this tired seamstress who was tired from a long day's work and wanted to rest her feet. Like that whole thing was a setup. And not only that, I mean, when you look at the famous images of her getting her thumbprint in the jail, if these officers were so viciously racist and they hated everything that these Negroes stood for, why then would they allow for these cameramen to come into the jail?
That is funny.
I mean, in the late 50s, and photography, like, people forget, like, not everybody was walking around with a cell phone back then. So people weren't just snapping pictures everywhere they went. Like, photography took a lot more effort back then than it does today. So again,
well, I can tell you, when I was in intake last week, they weren't allowing any cell phones in there.
Exactly. So again, I mean, even the imagery of Martin Luther King, like, he has his fedora on nice and tight, he has his blazer, buttoned up, and he's looking spiffy to a T, and he's getting roughed up by the police officers, and you get the perfect image. Like, this whole thing is theatrical.
How far do you take this, though? Like, do you think, because I watched an interview of Rodney King and I was like, whoa, like, I was just very young at that time, but rewatching the interview after, it was almost like Oprah wrote his little script, and I was like, wait a second. So it's this weird combination where there's plants and things that actually are contrived, but then there's maybe real events that then are hijacked because people like jump on them, right? So it's both, right? And it's like hard to figure out which is happening, but almost we can say always the case. If there's some event that happens, people who are in marketing who could further their agenda, and their job is to do that, they're certainly going to figure out a way to do that every single time, especially now with media. I mean, that's why calling someone a conspiracy theorist is really silly today, given that what kind of operations are possible given the technology, right? Technology is ubiquitous. So you could be someone who's just like a nobody and have an agenda and actually post something on 4chan, and suddenly it's fake, but everyone runs with it like it's real. If that's possible for a nobody to do on 4chan, I mean, think what the government can do, multi-governments, corporations tied to governments can do. Yeah, they just do it constantly, and everyone's like, no, reality's real.
And they think it's far-fetched. They think it's far-fetched. They think it's inconceivable that there would be a conspiracy theory and that the government would be in on it and that foreign agents would be in on it. They think that everything that they feel is a natural feeling that just appeared to them because they're so brilliant.
Right. Yeah. Or they live, Chad, they live in a time that happened before in the past. We agree, but not in my time of living. This isn't something that happened to me. Okay. So we're reaching 3 hours. I'm going to give you all a chance to say goodbye to the chat and also plug your channels and whatever else you want to say on every topic we've had. I really appreciate all of you coming on. And we'll go, AJ, go first.
Thanks for having me on, Jim Bob. My name is AJ Hurley. You can find me mainly on Instagram. Just started a YouTube channel. Hardly ever on X, but you can just find me at AJ Hurley. I also am a speaker and activist for the White Rose Resistance, pro-life organization across the U.S. And you can go there to www.thewhiterose.life. Thewhiterose.life.
Great. Thank you so much, AJ. Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on the Mixed Bag. Really appreciate it. Nice to formally meet Hake and AJ. Keep up the good work. And you can find me at Chad O. Jackson on YouTube, IG, and X.
All right. And Hake, sir?
It was an honor coming on with you guys. Nice to meet all of you, talking face-to-face somewhat. TheHakeReport.com, and you can find all my stuff there. And when you're emotional, when you're intellectual, you're prone to believe lies. And so just watch the assumptions. Watch what you think are logical conclusions to what you see, because you don't really know.
Awesome. All right, well, with from everybody here, thanks so much in the audience. Chad, God bless you. AJ, God bless you. Hake, God bless you. I hope you come back, Hake, sometime when it suits you. I appreciate that. Everybody in the audience, thank you so much for another Mixed Bag panel, number 6. Appreciate all the super chats. Appreciate all the donations and the new members. Welcome, new members. And with that, I bid you a glorious evening. Enjoy yourselves. And again, God bless you all.